you ever speak to me like that again, you better be wearing a cup.
Baby steps.
One break, I'm in
Okay, friends, let's everybody take your positions, please. Here we go. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, rolling. Dave!
And
Dave!
Unchained.
welcome to Dave and Dave Unchained, a Van Halen podcast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Dave.
And we are at episode 100.
Sounds like Johnny's getting laid.
We finally made it. It is our 8th anniversary, believe it or not, and it fell on our 100th episode. So what do you have to say about the big 100?
Wow, I don't know how we did that because mathematically that doesn't work. Didn't we have like some bonus episodes when we first started?
Yes.
Is that what we did?
Yes.
That's what we did.
But-
Wow, look at that. So 8 and 100 episodes later. That is crazy.
It's really nuts. And not only that, but I should total up the amount of hours. You figure it's like something around like, I don't know, 3-4 hours each one. And you add it
Oh
up,
my
it's
God.
like...
Yeah. You don't want to think about that.
Yeah, it's
But
incredible.
man, I mean, for something we did like, let's stop talking about it on the phone and texting back and forth and record a podcast and see what happens. And here we are.
Yeah.
8 years later,
Totally
hitting
nuts.
all over the world, in
Mhm.
Iran, Australia.
That's right.
It's crazy.
It's really nuts. It's really wild. All over the country, all over the world. We have people in Canada, Australia, like you said, Iran. Oh, we got a bunch of people in England. Where else? Let's see. Switzerland, Sweden. We have all kinds of people. So that's what's the coolest part about the internet is you can reach so many people and have that kind of stretching out by being on Instagram or being on Facebook or being on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And Spotify obviously goes all around the world. So that's really, really cool. And we're also available on iTunes and Spreaker and all the different platforms. So it's really good. And the cool part is that people keep discovering it. You know what I mean? Like there's people that have been with us a long time and then also people that are just discovering and, I just came upon this. And I find that myself, I come upon podcasts and I'm like, oh my God. And I get really into it and I start listening to that podcast. So it's been fun and we want to thank all of you guys because that's why we do this. So thank you so much for all your support over the years and all you guys listening and writing in letters and just being there for all of us. So we're one big VH community. So it's lots of fun that you guys are still with us after 8 years. So speaking of which, we're going to get right into some Van Halen news.
Van Halen.
Well, this one came out of left field, so we don't talk about this guy much. But Mike Post, the producer from Van Halen 3. Now, we call him Mike Post the producer of Van Halen 3. Mike Post happens to be an incredibly accomplished musician who is known mostly for TV show themes. This guy is like the John Williams of TV show themes. He has done the Rockford Files, Hill Street Blues, NYPD Blue, you name it. This guy has done it. Law and Order, so many famous TV show themes, just unbelievable resume that he has. Now, Mike was the producer of Van Halen 3, which is kind of out of the blue. He's not known for producing rock bands, but he appeared on the Hustle podcast, and he did an interview because he's promoting a new compilation that he has about his own work, and he got into a little Van Halen 3 talk, and he started talking about how Ed took over on drums for Alex because of the period that Alex was in at the time. So Post had said that I knew the record wasn't really good. I knew the record was kind of crappy, but it was the way Ed wanted it, which was shocking to hear. He also explained that Alex was going through a messy divorce at the time, and he had a substance abuse battle that kept him from playing up to his usual standards. He said it was one of the worst periods of his life, and he was drinking a lot, and he just wasn't Al, and he wasn't playing like Al. So Ed thought the best plan would be for him to take over on drums so Al could focus on his health and getting through his divorce and getting that settled. And Post had to have a come to Jesus moment with Al, and he said, Al, I got to do something really difficult, and it's going to be a really hard conversation, and I just ask that from the bottom of my heart, I ask you to stay calm and use your logic and your kindness. He says, Al, you're in the middle of a divorce, you're really fucked up, and you're not playing like yourself. It's my job is to get your little brother to do a record sober and facilitate that. So you got to sit down and concentrate on yourself and concentrate on your divorce and concentrate on getting rid of all your substance abuse. You don't want to stop your little brother from doing something that's very different for him. He's had tremendous struggles. Be a big brother here, put yourself second, and let this kid do what he wants to do. He's earned it. So Alex agreed to step away from the project, and he didn't exactly say how many Van Halen 3 songs feature Eddie on drums, but Alex was able to work through his issues in time to support the album with the tour. He said it didn't take him long. It took him 4 to 5, 6 months, and he was great. They started rehearsing, and Al started sounding like Al and made the song sound twice as good from what Ed played on the record. Then he also added that when asked about whether this is an Eddie Van Halen solo album that everybody always calls that album, he says it was never going to be a solo album. It was just going to be an album Eddie's way, without any negotiations with a lead singer. He said this lead singer, meaning Gary Cherone, grew up on Van Halen. It wasn't somebody with a big sense of himself the way Sammy was. Ed basically came in and said, look, sing it this way, do it that way. He did the whole thing at Ed's place. He said, look, Ed, I'm not going to show you how to play guitar, and I'm not going to show you how to write a song, and I'm not going to show Gary how to sing it. What I'm really going to do is find ways for you to execute your dreams on this. And if I don't think something sounds right, I'm going to say it. But that's really it. It's not going to emanate from me. And he said the way he got me to do it was, he said, I want to do one sober. I want to do one without being altered. And I said, great, I'm here for you, and I'll do that. But he did say that it was kind of crappy. That was his words. He kind of just recognized it for what it was. So that was wild to hear. What did you think of that?
That was a great interview. He talks about other things, too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's well worth the listen. But the Van Halen 3 stuff was a revelation in some spots.
Yeah.
Everyone assumed Al had been dry since like 1988, and that wasn't the case.
No.
It confirms some suspicions that things like Al didn't play on the entire album. It's the first time I've ever seen, heard, or read anything from Mike Post on that album. And the fact that he just flat out was like, yeah, it was crappy. Like, he makes no bones about it, right?
Yeah.
But he said he made the album the way Ed wanted to. And that was that. He knew it had issues, and he didn't hide from that. So it's a great interview and well worth everyone's time to listen to beyond the highlights we just discussed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, for sure. Interesting enough, though, no discussion of Michael Anthony at all, which I thought was shocking. Now, what I have heard, and I don't know if you've heard the same thing, Dave, that there's really only 3 songs on that album that have the band all together.
Yes, because I think Mike said as much, that he only played on like 3 or 4 tracks.
And I think Alex played on 3, too, the same ones that Mike did. This is what I heard, that Without You, One I Want, and Fire in the Hole are the 3 that really have the band on there. Is that what you heard?
I think those are the songs. Mike had done an interview for a Japanese magazine, and somebody had translated it. He definitely made note that he was not on the entire album.
Right. Also wanted to let you guys know about Heart. Ann and Nancy Wilson appeared on the Howard Stern show on April 10th, where they talked to him about Van Halen. Apparently, they were friends with the brothers back in the day, and Howard asked them about a famous story that the Van Halen brothers thought it would be a good idea to have a sexual relationship with the Wilson sisters because they're sisters and they're brothers. And Nancy said, it sounds like a publicist's dream, kind of like the guys in Kiss, the Wilson sisters and the guys in Kiss. So she said the proposition came up after a long night of reveling with the 2 musical duos. And Nancy said, yeah, one of many bad ideas one night, kind of thing. Stern said, wouldn't it be great if you guys could mate and create future rock bands? And Nancy said of Eddie and Alex that those Van Halen brothers, they were nuts. They were really imbibers. They were always in the bag, like way in the bag. And Ann said it was sure interesting to watch the brothers' dynamic, because they go from fisticuffs to proclaiming love for each other, which is something we've heard from a lot of people. And Nancy said, we never really hung out or had much of an opportunity in the wild and crazy times that we were in the 80s there, with so much imbibery and connivery going on. She said, but they were really solid brothers and cool people and musicians, and it was fun to know them and be part of the circus with them. I always thought, Dave, and I don't know if you heard this, that Ed, back in the day, like way before Val in the 70s or early 80s, whatever, that Nancy and Ed had a fling. I don't even know if it's true, though. What do you think?
I don't know. I think they were friendly or friends or something like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the rock stars back in the day were pining for the women of heart, right?
Yep.
So, who the heck knows what the truth is. It was interesting because if this topic had come up 10 years ago, Howard would have spent like a whole hour on it.
Oh, yeah.
So you could tell how he's mellowed out over the years as it was really toned down.
For sure.
I saw this article once. I think it might have even been Behind the Music, where there was like this article on Hart in like the National Enquirer or something like that. And they were quoted as saying it was our first time, implying they had some kind of sexual encounter together, which was not the truth.
Yeah, that was just
this is the kind of BS they had to deal with.
Well, listen, it's not easy being two ladies in the rock world in the 70s for sure. And they were really pioneers. I mean, they really were. And they probably put up with a lot of shit. So I give them a lot of credit for still being here, still rocking. They were on The Tonight Show recently, sounding great, and still has a great voice, and Nancy can still rock out a guitar, so God bless them for still going on. They're in their 70s, and it's awesome that they're still going. So that's cool, and also want to let you guys know, David Lee Roth dropped 2 new songs. But are they new? They're really kind of old. I don't really think they're from the California sessions. You got Scotch and Sofa, and here's a clip.
If you need me, try me weekly, freaky deaky. Scotch and sofa. If you want it, yes I got it. You can't stop it. Scotch and sofa.
This has got horns and a thumping bass line with a steady beat with more tambourine than drums. Background vocals are kind of low in the mix. This is sort of an old recording, I think. I don't know what style of music you would even call this. Sounds like something off a Diamond Dave era. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard it once and I was like, that's all I really need to
hear.
It's
It's kind of a jumpy, bouncy, it's a little all over the place. Then, this one was pretty wild, called Election Year. Here's a clip.
I'm washing next to faces. Got my uniforms and dirty fucking nails, but here I come again around your bases. Got a game you gonna like. Escape kind of game, one's wife. I know you're dubious, it's the bullshit. Think it's funny? Funny as a mob. It sucks all day. All work, no play. I'll skip that test. Next.
This, I think, is from the No Holds Barbecue. This is more chaotic, rock-oriented song, and he's using the refrain, fight the power, over and over again, which is kind of weird, because that's obviously Public Enemy's thing. But what'd you make of Election Year?
Again, it was nice to hear once, but I'm not going to have to hear it more than once. But I'll give Dave full credit. He is opening up his archive.
Oh, yeah.
And letting that stuff out on what he's been working. And even though I'm kind of like, well, whatever, this is what he did this time, it definitely shows that he wasn't pinned down to one style, and he was definitely experimenting all over the place. Admittedly, in my opinion, with mixed results, but you got to give the guy credit. At least he was trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of new songs, I am so excited about this. A new song as a collaboration with Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. Finally, these two guys have gotten together and put out a new recording called The Sea of Emotion Part 1. They made a video to go with it, and it has a 70s kind of vibe where Satch has got shaggy brown hair and a fringed jacket, and Vai's got long blonde hair with a headband and a striped suit, and that's really kind of cool. They look like they're on the set of That 70s Show, which is kind of funny. There's weed smoking, but the song is immense. So good with a killer hook, tasty solos. Here's a clip. Now, this is something I have been waiting years for. Vai and Satch coming together, and I love when they're going back and forth soloing. Oh, this is a gem. What did you think of this?
Totally agree with you. This has been a long time coming.
Oh, yeah.
And I really like the song, too. I'm really glad it wasn't just like some 10-minute guitar solo-a-thon. There's some meat to this song, which, honestly, I would expect from Joe and Steve. It's pretty accessible, too, as Joe wrote this one, but the two of them play marvelously on it, and more to come on this a little later. But for now, great song. I've been listening to it a lot.
Oh, yeah, big time. Also want to let you guys know about a podcast called Shred with Shifty, and what this is a podcast by Chris Shiflett, who is the lead guitarist for the Foo Fighters. He had Wolf on as a special guest, and for those musicians who want to learn how to play Wolf's incredible opus, Take a Bow, Wolf actually takes out his guitar and breaks the whole thing down. And it's also on video, so you can watch him with his hands on, close up to the video camera, showing you how he does the song. Even if you're not a guitarist, it's really interesting to watch. He even breaks out Frankenstein for the camera and shows everybody, which is incredible to see. And this goes to show you just like his insane talent. You can see just how easy he plays that guitar. It's kind of frightening the way he just like naturally plays it like it's nothing. But it really is tremendous. And did you hear about this, Dave?
No, I didn't, but I wouldn't be surprised that he makes it look very easy.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It makes it look like he's pouring a glass of water. Yeah.
Very not easy.
No, it's not at all. And it just shows you his incredible talent. It's unbelievable, that kid. So now, also wanted to let you guys know that Sammy Hagar paid tribute to the late Toby Keith, who passed away in February, on the CMT Awards. And Sammy came out wearing a Toby Keith shirt, singing his song, I Love This Bar, which is Toby's famous tune that he used to always play at Cabo Wabo with Sammy. That was kind of something he used to come down and play at the birthday bashes and stuff like that. And Sammy said, I was so worried I wasn't going to make it through the performance emotionally. He wrote on Facebook, it was hard for me working up to it. When I hit the stage with Toby's wonderful band that I have played with many times over the years, the audience, the energy, enthusiasm, and love that filled that building, every tear of sadness, of joy was there. It was a beautiful experience, to say the least. So proud and honored to have been invited. We all miss that bigger-than-life, wonderful man, Mr. Toby Keith. So here's a clip of Sam singing I Love This Bar.
We got winners, we got losers, chain smokers and boozers, and we got high techs, and we got bikers, bunch of thirsty hitchhikers, and the girls next door dress up like movie stars. I love this bar.
So that was really cool that Sammy was on TV and paying tribute. He is truly friends with Toby. That's no, like, guest appearance. They were longtime friends, those two. It was really sad that he passed away. He was a young man. He was only 62 years old. So listen to this. Searching around, I came to this website called thesoundofvinyl.com. They were selling signed copies of Alex's book, Brothers, for $31.99. And I was like, holy shit. And they were all sold out. Isn't that weird? Why would
I didn't even hear about that.
No one heard about this. And why on the soundofvinyl.com? And was there like a limited edition thing? It was a really strange thing out of nowhere. And that book's not coming out for a long, long time.
That seems like a cheap price for an autograph
And
book.
that seems like a cheap price for an autograph. Exactly. It came out of nowhere. I couldn't believe that. That was weird. Also want to let you guys know that our friend Simon Alkin has put out part 5 of Edward Van Halen, a Musician, which is called Eddie Van Halen Gets Discovered. It's like over 6 minutes long, and it's part 5 of his series. And it gets into the part where Eddie got signed, which shows, kind of the hard part before they got signed, actually. Alex Van Halen said in the video, we knew what we wanted to do, and we put everything into it. And he said they were building a following in the clubs, and Eddie said, while Spinal Tap was going to 11, I was going to 15. He says, we believed in ourselves, and we weren't taking no for an answer. Roth was also in there saying that he would always bring in music that the audience would dance to. And Ed said, no matter what I played, it always sounded like me, because that's all I could do. And Marshall Burrell, which was their first manager, who had, I think, worked at one of the clubs there, had tipped off Warner Brothers, and Mo Austin and Ted Templeman from Warner Brothers went down there and obviously signed the guys. And Ted says in the video, and they show Ted, which is rare because you never see Ted, said it was like falling in love with a girl, he said, the first time he saw Eddie, because he was so overwhelmed by how incredible he played at the age of 22. And Dave, I want to tell you, the end of the video, we got to thank you. How do you like that? We were in the credits.
Yes, I saw that. I was super flattered, right?
Yes.
I think I sent that to you, actually.
Thank you to Simon. Yeah. We're happy to have helped promote his stuff. And also, we're happy to promote our friend Steve Rosen, who is on his 3rd printing of Tone Chaser, his book on Eddie Van Halen. And that one has a new cover and new exclusive pictures inside the same text. But interesting enough, is Steve has been sharing a lot of his interviews that he did years ago. We're talking 40 years ago, when he was initially doing a authorized biography of Eddie Van Halen. And he has this 4.5-hour interview with Alex. It is in 6 parts. It is tremendous. And it really is something else because it's chock full of interesting stuff. So I want to just run by some highlights that I listened to and wanted to let you guys know about, and then we'll get Dave's take on it. So now, he said that Ed never liked getting his hair cut, and he never liked playing piano, but his mom always told him that someday you will thank me for this. And he said it was the truth, that he said he learned structure and harmony and different chords from playing piano, and they had an overall knowledge of music better than the average kid. He also said that he and Ed shared a room, and that the door always remained open because they were both scared shitless of the dark, which is kind of funny. And then Ed's dad would sometimes bring Ed on as a bass player, and he said, I don't know how to play bass. He's a kid at the time. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll just yell out the chord changes and you can kind of figure out what they are. And he says half the bass players we have play all over the place anyway. And Alex said, I used to play chromatically and in between the cracks. He said that he and Ed have always been different from the norm, that Ed was a shy, introverted kid, and that he was the cute one. All the girls were always all over him, saying how cute he was, and he was quite the focus of the ladies' attention. And then he also took first place 3 years in a row at the Southern California Youth Festival, which used to have like 5,000 kids perform, and that's how incredible that Ed was. And he said that he would walk up to the judges and smile his smile, and he said just always win them over automatically with his incredible talent. So he said that was really interesting. He said growing up, there were typical rowdy kids riding bikes and dirt bikes and go-karts, and the funny thing is, he said, that little Ed, he could run like a motherfucker, and that's what I hate about it, because whenever I got into a fight, I couldn't catch him. This guy was like a squirrel, but when I caught him, he knew I did. So that was kind of funny. And then he also talked about Mark Stone being in the band, and he said during that period of time, he was playing all the wrong notes, but he said when they were a power trio as Mammoth back in the day, he says it wasn't entertaining enough that Ed on vocals, he said that, they needed to get a singer, so they got this guy, Gary Booth, He was like this big guy with gusto, but he really couldn't sing all that well. But they were ready to do a battle of the bands with him, and then the guy ended up like chickening out and stuff like that because he faked laryngitis, and that really pissed him off. So they were struggling to try to get that singer spot fulfilled. And he says, basically, he says the way clubs work are people dance and they get thirsty. They buy drinks, and when they buy drinks, the clubs makes money, and then they're happy, and then they hire you again. That's sort of like the way it worked. And he said when it came to Roth, and let me tell you something, in this interview, he does not hold back and is scathing about the way he talks about Roth. He says, I couldn't stand the motherfucker, and I couldn't stand his band, which was Red Ball Jet at the time. He said that he used to rent equipment from him. He said Dave walked around with chest hair and long blonde hair, and he said he had this certain confidence about him, but he couldn't sing for shit. He says the guy was really just sort of outspoken and loudmouth and unique looking, and that sort of made him stand out. But he says every business deal he's ever been involved with has been a financial and artistic disaster, which was crazy. So this I didn't know. Apparently they approached Mark Stone's brother Brad to do vocals for the band, and Mark was actually against the idea. And his brother sort of has an operatic voice. Alex kept saying, you needed more than music. We needed some singing going on. So when they had Ed on vocals, he said he was good, but we really needed Ed to concentrate on playing guitar. Plus, he wasn't visual enough. He says Roth was incredibly visual. He had the mouth and he had the physicality to back it up. He says that Roth initially auditioned in his parents' living room, and he says, I gotta be honest, when he auditioned, I was thoroughly appalled. He gave him the song Still Alive and Well to perform, and he says, I absolutely was incredibly disappointed. And then he said that he gave Roth another shot when Roth played on an acoustic guitar, and he said from the very beginning, this guy was cocky. He says he used to run around telling us how to dress and how to do this and that. He said the guy had a certain presence, but he said we ended up landing gigs at Gazzari's and the Starwood and Walter Mitty's and Barnacle Bill's and all these different places. So he couldn't really complain about Roth because Roth was getting them gigs and attention. And he said that Roth was the one who suggested that they change their name to Van Halen. He said it sounds different, it's unique. He also said that they had a keyboard player in the band by the name of Jim Pusey, which was really interesting. I never heard that before.
That part I knew. That was in a book somewhere.
Okay. But he said his heart really wasn't in the band. And then they had to fire him and let go of him. And then they became the house band at Gazzari's, and they got sort of a steady gig there. And he said, the thing about Roth was he was incredibly in tune to what people wanted to dance to, which was interesting. And he said that, Mark really wasn't into the music, and we had to let him go. And then their PA blew up, and Michael Anthony from the band Snake offered to let him use their PA, and then they got Mike in the band, and this is how Van Halen initially formed. He said they were playing 6 days a week, 5 hours a night, and he also said that She's the Woman was one of the first originals they played, which was interesting, considering that was on the last Van Halen album. I never knew why that song never made it further than it did, because I thought that song was fantastic. It should have been the first single.
Well, didn't they mine part of it for Mean Street? Like the breakdown?
Yeah, the breakdown, yeah.
So I think, once you start taking bits and pieces of a song.
Maybe.
But I agree with you. It's got a total classic Van Halen groove.
It just screams Van Halen. You know what
yes.
I mean? So now he also ripped Roth again. He said Roth never sang a song from beginning to end. That's why he has such a hard time playing live, which is why he wants to become a movie star now. You should note that this interview took place in September of 1985. So we're at a prime time there. They said Gazzari's used to pay them $100 a night to split between the four of them. They walk away with $25 playing for 5 hours. Unbelievable. They ended up moving to the whiskey, but he said they always had confidence that they knew it was going to happen for them. He said, but Dave never changed. He called him a calculated, worthless piece of shit and said everything he does is calculated. I hate his guts. I never liked the guy, but he was a necessary evil because he was outgoing and he was energetic and he was an achiever. He says, to be honest, if it was up to to Ed and I, we would be in the studio making great music, but we would just be sitting there, meaning in the studio. That Roth sort of brought them out in front of people. He says, as much as I hate Roth, I have to give him a certain amount of respect for his gung-ho attitude. He said, Ed is 10 times the man Roth will ever be. And then he said something that was creepy as fuck. He goes, and that Roth character fucked my brother's girlfriend. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck was that all about? So I have no idea even who he's talking about, but apparently he's bitter about that. So I don't know.
He was very bitter at Roth during this interview.
Oh, it was brutal. So then he talked about Terry Kilgore. Remember our friend Terry Kilgore, who was on the podcast back in the day, and he was also the guitarist for Your Filthy Little Mouth, Dave's 4th solo album. He said he was never as good as Ed. He says Terry Kilgore's a nice guy, but he had his head up his ass. We were on a different level. He also noted that Ted wanted Sammy to be the lead singer in Van Halen, because at the time when Van Halen was putting out their first album, Sammy was in limbo, and Ted knew what he could do, and he was a little ticked off that Ted didn't talk to them about it, but he says it never really came up until 3 or 4 years later. He said, had he said something, it might have changed the course of history. So that was sort of interesting, but, listen, change the course of history, but not for the better. I mean, they did finally get Sammy in the band, but now he also talked about back in the day when they were playing live. He says, we would draw 5,000 people in concert without a record contract. That was unheard of at the time. He spoke very, very highly of Gene Simmons. Said Gene Simmons, he says, is a very interesting person. If anybody taught us anything, it was Gene Simmons. He taught us how to turn knobs in the studio. He taught us how to work in the studio, how to be relaxed and to play. He made us more comfortable than when we made our first record. Like the experience with Gene, because Gene flew them to New York to record at Electric Ladyland Studios to make a demo before Van Halen won and before they got signed to Warner Brothers. He said at the time, Gene was kind of looking toward his future, saying, I couldn't continue spitting blood for a living. Little did he know that he'd be doing it for another 40 fucking some odd years. Unbelievable. That's kind of funny. And he says, we were bowled over. This guy was paying for everything. He flew us over, put us up, fed us, everything. He says that he wanted to change the band's name to Virus, which is kind of funny. And that the name that they recorded under at Electric Ladyland Studios was Daddy Longlegs. That was a name that's always been floating around out there. And apparently, some of the Van Halen demos with Gene Simmons leaked onto the radio at K-Rock on the West Coast. A DJ played some of the demos. He said Bill Aucoin, which is the manager of Kiss at the time, was not interested in them. He said, we were 4 nobodies who didn't know what the fuck was going on. The only one who cared about us was Gene Simmons. And he goes, I gotta be honest, I'm a little bit bitter. Had it been today, it would have been a whole different scenario. But they looked up to Gene, and they really appreciated all he did for them. He goes, if Ed had the ego trip Roth did, he'd be parading around, but he is the most shy person I know.
I don't think those demos leaked onto California radio. I think Dave knew Rodney Bingenheimer and had him play them on the radio.
Okay. He said that Marshall Burl turned out to be a disastrous first manager, and he always wanted to cash in on them. And he said something about the band was supposed to go to Japan and make a 3-song film or something like that. And he said that Roth was the kind of person who always acts like he knows what's going on, but he doesn't know shit. He said Ted was a total taskmaster and that he lost control when the band started recording in 5150 because the band wanted more control. Like, for example, he said that Ted said, we're going to work from noon to 6. And, they were like, that's really limiting because sometimes we'll go 2 days straight. He goes, Jump was recorded at 3 in the morning. You know what I mean? So they just had a different sort of timetable. And he said Roth used to sing his songs one line at a time. Surprisingly, as incredible as Van Halen 1 is, he said he's not very happy with the first album. He said that I'm the one of the mics went dead on his kick drum, and it didn't pick up that sound, and he was a little pissed off about that. But he also praised Don Landis, saying he was the best engineer that has ever lived, and that at the time, I remember, September 1985, they had Ted producing 5150, and then he said, hopefully Don will join us. So it makes you wonder if there was this rift going on between Don and Ted. Meanwhile, Don ended up working on the album, and Ted wasn't involved, which is kind of funny. But interesting enough, he said, Sammy doesn't want to work with Don because he doesn't like his quirks. I don't know what the hell that's all about, but there's some sort of background going on there. They also said, I always talked about the Van Halen opening up for the Stones in 1981 on the Fair Warning Tour. Well, the band apparently opened up for the Stones in 1978 in New Orleans. So there's some information there. He's also not happy with the way Van Halen 2 came out. He says they did it too fast, right off the road. They went right into the studio and started recording. He said the material was really strong, but he felt that the record could have been huge, but he didn't have the sound that he wanted. He said it wasn't technically up to his standards. He did feel that Women and Children First, they spent more time recording, and they had more input, so they had added a little more of that. He also noted that Ted was not even involved in the recording of Jump, I'll Wait, and Drop Dead Legs. Ted started to realize that the band had a different idea about how to record than what he wanted to do. Regarding Fair Warning, he says the album was overproduced. There was too much production on that album. He said that Ted at the time was looking for a hit single, and when they did Diver Down, Roth brought Dancing in the Street to Van Halen. He got disgusted. He was furious. He said, this is not Van Halen. At the time, 1985, when this interview happened, he said, Bowie and Jagger have their version out now, and it sounds a hell of a lot better than ours, which, to be honest with you, is not even close. That Bowie and Jagger version is fine. It's okay, but it's kind of really thin in comparison to what Van Halen did to it, because half that song is Eddie Van Halen original, you know, the way all the music that he put into it. But he also noted that the record company was pining for a hit. This is around when they did Pretty Woman. He said they were dying for a hit. Then he also noted that he was mad that Ed was so stupidly played on Michael Jackson's record that it caused us from going to number one. He says that Warner Brothers was also not pushing the Fair Warning album. He said he wasn't happy with that, and that it got to the point where Roth got so frustrated that he burst into a Warner Brothers board meeting and kind of complained about it. Alex said that he felt Van Halen became a workhorse for Warner Brothers in the sense that they were sort of like a steady, guaranteed platinum selling band who was pumping money into the company, but they didn't want to like grow the band. They had no interest in growing the band. Now, he said that when Ed finally got 5150, originally it was supposed to be a room to keep his amps and his keyboards, and it turned into a studio, and he said it became Ed's toy. You know, it was really funny. He said, on 1984, we had the freedom and no pressure. Jump was recorded at 3 a.m., and Ed would give me a call, and he says, I got something good, and I'd come running down, but he did call Dave a shithead. He said he has a compulsive feeling of trying to be better than everybody. He was never relaxed in the studio. He'd yell at everybody if they were 1 minute late. Then he would say, oh, my voice, I can't sing right now. He says he's a calculated person who only does things that suit him when it suits him. And he said it's always has to be done right then and there. And then when he fucks up, it was okay for him to leave and scoot out. He said, sorry, fellas, I can't do it today. And Ted said he had never worked with an asshole like him in my life. But meanwhile, Ted was losing control at 5150, end up, producing Roth solo albums. But he says Ed doesn't have a mean bone in his body. He said after years of working with Roth, you finally appreciate what it's like working with a human being, meaning Sammy. He said Ed wanted to leave the band in 1981, but Alex claimed that he begged him to stay. He said, we worked so hard, don't leave now. We have to start all over again. And Al convinced him to stay because he thought 1985 would be the most financially lucrative year. We could finally be able to do what we wanted to do. We got rid of our management. We got rid of Roth. Sammy got rid of his solo career, and we're starting fresh. This is going to be a new new band. He said, when Noel Monk became our manager, we were green, and we did it because we were drunk one night and decided to make him our manager. We knew nothing. Warner Brothers figured that if he could handle the Sex Pistols, he could handle us because we were rowdy, like them. But January 1st, 1985, Noel wanted a new contract, and in 1984, he made $2.2 million off of us. But the truth is, he lost us about $5 million because we had a car stereo company that wanted to endorse us for $2.2 million called Sparkomatic. Roth and Monk lost the whole deal because Roth felt it wasn't a prestigious enough company. Yes ended up picking up the deal and got the money. We had an opportunity to go to Japan for 2 days and do a couple of commercials. He says they let that go. He said that they ended up grossing like $22 million on the 1984 tour, but it was also a very expensive tour because it had 80 people, 10 trucks, 10 buses, and he says Noel even had his own bus with his, he said his fat pig wife, which is horrible to say. So then he said that Roth is losing his voice. This motherfucker can't sing. He's 30 years old. He can't do it anymore. The US Festival was a disaster. It's a perfect example. The guy spent the whole night wiggling his butt at the audience. He said Sammy's like a fresh shot of adrenaline. And when they asked him about the Claudio story, he says, I don't know. I never heard that.
You had to throw that in there.
Hey, listen, that's what he said, okay? So, so it just supports my argument.
Yeah. Keep arguing.
He said the last contact between Ed and Dave was in the middle of June in 1985, 6 months into the year. He says, we had nothing recorded and Roth used every excuse. He said he couldn't go into the studio unless the Noel Monk situation was settled. Then he couldn't go into the studio without a producer, so we got in contact with Ted, and he was willing to work. He says, we even got in contact with Quincy Jones, who was willing to work with Van Halen. Can you imagine if Quincy Jones produced a Van Halen album? He said Roth didn't show up, and Eddie ended up going to his house, which is called Rothwood, and he said Eddie is not diplomatic or one to mince words. And Roth said, I can't stand working with a drunk, meaning Al. And Ed said, fuck you. And Alex said that Roth had missed 5 shows and fucked up left and right. He made an asshole of himself at the US Festival. And he goes, I had to sit there with Pete Angelis and edit 3 songs together and doctor it up to send footage to Showtime. He says, I was only drunk on stage twice. And he says, but I never missed a show. He says that attorneys had meetings regarding the departure of Roth, but he said Roth never showed up to the meetings because he thought I would physically harm him. And he claims he's partially responsible for the name Van Halen because he wrote half the songs and wanted 50% of the publishing. And Alex claims that Ted Templeman wrote more of the melodies than Roth wrote in his life. Then he cited the Al Waite situation where they ended up getting together with Michael McDonald to help out on that song, so that was interesting. He says Roth's musical taste is different. He says you can tell from his EP. He said that Roth did ask us if we didn't mind if he did the record, but what he was really doing was setting up his whole video thing to see how well he fared on his own before he cut the umbilical cord 6 months later by making excuses for 6 months. So now apparently this is the big gripe, is that Dave dragged out the whole EP thing for 6 months, he thinks, for testing the waters for a solo career. He says, I can't say the 11 years with him wasn't interesting, but certainly fun. But as the years went by, it started deviating more and more from what we wanted to do. I liked the fact that we had 4 different personalities. Ed liked the jazzy progressive stuff. I liked the headbanging stuff. Mike likes Disneyland. And Roth likes Fred Astaire. He said, in a way, it was good because everybody had different influences in the pot. Then he also said, I think Roth is an asshole, underhanded, low-level piece of shit. If I ever see him, I'm going to kick the shit out of him. The main reason I'm upset is that he went about this in an underhanded way. He was deceptive and deceiving. He waited until he didn't want to make a record with us. We wasted 6 months of the year waiting for him, but the whole thing is going to work out for the best. And when asked if there were any good moments with Roth, he said, to be honest, there never were any good moments with Roth. That's the honest-to-God truth. The good moments I shared was with Mike and Ed. Roth thought he knew everything and always had a phony, worldly air of bullshit about him. So that was quite raw and direct from Alex. And I am very curious to see if his book is in that vein or not. What did you make of this?
Well, if you haven't been able to figure out now, it was quite the interview that was done. It's a lot of listening, so thank you for pulling out all the highlights, Dave.
Yeah.
Again, if you have the time, it's well worth listening to. It is a fascinating preview, I would think, of the book that's coming out later this year. As I was listening to all this, I was wondering, is Alex listening to this?
Yeah,
or
good
his
question.
co-writer listening to this?
Yeah.
And are they sitting there going, oh, nuts, I totally forgot about that. Is it too late to put it in the book? I just wonder if Alex still remembered everything. But he's very much a straight shooter, very much bitter at Roth. Interesting behind-the-scene things that he was discussing. It definitely makes me even look more forward to the book that's coming out in October. But this is really must-hear listening for any Van Halen fan as to what Alex was thinking at the time, and just a fascinating look at the Van Halen history.
Absolutely. Now, guess what, Dave? Val is in love. How do you like that?
Here we go again.
So, Valerie Bertinelli, who is out promoting her new book, Indulge. It's a new cookbook where she talks about her food and emotional relationship to it and everything. She is out promoting it, and she says, this was not supposed to happen. She told People magazine, I am in love. She's 63 years old, and she's on the cover of People, Dave. You can believe it. It was a seesaw of emotions because I was adamant I was never falling in love again. I was supposed to die with my 6 cats and my dog and very happily live the rest of my years alone. I'm good alone. Apparently, what happened was she said that he is a writer from the East Coast, if you can believe that, Dave. She said, my belly is flip-flopping, and this was not supposed to happen. I want to be clear that this process has taken a long time. Now, she divorced in 2022 from her husband Tom, and she lost Eddie in 2020, her ex-husband. She says, I got more intentional about my healing. That meant a lot of walks with my dog Luna and a lot of therapy sessions and a lot of learning that I had deserved to feel good. The cookbook, she said, was an offshoot of my emotional and mental healing that I've been doing. First came the work, why I thought I didn't deserve to be loved, why I was using food to numb my feelings, and all the drama and trauma I hadn't dealt with Ed and my last marriage. She told the story through her recipes and intimate vignettes in Indulge. I know we're talking about a cookbook, but this cookbook got me through it all. In the book, she wrote, the more I let myself cry, the better I felt. I wasn't going to be happy or sad or thin. I wasn't trying to be anything other than who I was. And she said that this new guy came to her via Instagram a few years ago, was a very strictly platonic, and then there was something about him that I connected with that felt very familiar. She said they began chatting on the phone earlier in the year, and only recently did the relationship become romantic. It's crazy the comfort level, she said. I found joy first, and then a man entered my life. Oh boy. So what do you make of that?
Mazel tov to Val.
Love, exciting and new.
Come aboard.
We're expecting you.
The love boat. Well, I hope she boards the boat.
Exactly. Now, speaking of boat, she must be off her rocker because she was on The View, Dave, and apparently lost it on The View. So she went on The View to promote her book, Indulge, her new cookbook, and she sat down to promote it, and she kicked things off by saying she and Whoopi Goldberg had been bitching backstage. I'm like, okay. She said, what is this? Did I make this? Before being asked by Joan Behar if one of the dishes was turkey, prompting Bertinelli to snap back, Joy, I don't even know. I mean, you imagine being on a segment and she doesn't know what the hell's going on. Realizing things became awkward, Bertinelli attempted to steer the conversation toward politics, only to be censored once she started swearing on the air. She said, I just want you to know how dang important it is for everybody to vote, urging the audience to participate in local local elections before the first of 2 uncensored moments. Said, please vote for your own benefit. Thank you. I'm a little excited, and I just have to think about our Queen Taylor Swift, and then the sound cut off at the end, and then you could tell through her lips that she screamed out, calm the fuck down, as the audio dropped out. Said the conversation got even more frantic as Bertinelli lashed out at the online trolls who she called assholes in another segment that required censoring. After launching into other tangents, she attempted to bring her scattered appearance to a close with a bizarre historical quote. She said, just like Winston Churchill, when you're going through hell, keep going. Was it Churchill? I don't care. But when you're going through hell, you keep going. And I was like, oh my fucking God. So, wow. What did you think of that?
I guess she was having an off day, or were they serving margaritas before the show? I don't know. I didn't actually watch the episode, so I only read about it. But hey, whatever. Great exposure for her. She continues going on her book tour.
When she talked to USA Today promoting her book, she said, although she and Ed got divorced, we never stopped loving each other. Who knows? If not for cancer, we might have had a second wind. But I'm pretty sure that's wistful thinking. And then she clarified that it was wistful is very different from the word wishful. It was a wistful fantasy that I knew could never be true. The love that Ed and I shared, she said, did come from a wonderful place at the end of his life. It was our unconditional love for our son Wolfgang. My son was losing his father. I was in a relationship that was terribly wrong for me, and I was holding on to some sort of lifeline because of the years I had with Ed. I was madly in love with him when we met, but our love changed. He felt like a big brother to me. All I wanted to do was make it okay for Ed and make it okay for Wolfie. You fantasize or romanticize what you know really could never be. And then she said she got goosebumps one morning from feeling Eddie's presence from a flock of birds outside her house. She said, I still don't know that I've seen signs from my mom or dad, but maybe I have and I didn't even realize it, but I kept an eye out for it. But I'm thinking there are signs always in there and I don't even realize it. I do feel his presence and then I don't. So I'm hoping that he is in a place where he's able to go over his magical life that he had and not beat himself up so much and think of the good things that he did and not be in pain any longer, physical or emotional, because he was in a lot of emotional pain. And they said when he passed away that they commemorated his death by eating his favorite food. I don't know who suggested it, but we were like, should we have pizza? Because he couldn't eat, and the last thing Ed really wanted was pizza, because he loved pizza and burritos. So we had pizza in the hospital room in his honor. I hope people don't think that's morbid. Wow, she is an interesting woman.
Indeed.
And Wolf said about his mom that she always knew how to foster a comfortable and happy environment no matter what was happening. She was always very good about that and being very motherly. She's very funny. She visits me all the time. She's very proud. She loves to be involved in my life. I think it's very nice to have a parent that cheers you on and is proud of everything you do and supports you in every way. The biggest lesson I learned from my mom is how to be a kind, respectful human being. She leads with a very outwardly positive energy, and I think that's infectious. He says, there's enough negativity in the world. It's nice to have some people out there fighting a good fight with positivity, and she's certainly one of them. She is the kindest person you will ever know, and she deserves the world. She deserves to be happy, and I love her to the moon and back. So Wolf has nothing but wonderful things to say about his mother, so that's nice to hear. And Billy Sheehan, Dave, was talking a little Roth stuff on an interview with Ryan Roxy when they asked him about the famous duct tape line. He said that Roth put on his stage that no one else could cross. He said that did not happen on my tour, not on Eat 'em and Smile. He said, but it did exist later. It did exist on the Skyscraper tour because that was one of the reasons I wasn't there. He said that no one was allowed to cross that line past the duct tape at any time. But he says, that's what I heard. On the Eat 'em and Smile tour, Steve and I were running all over the stage like maniacs from top to bottom, all over the place. There was no restrictions at all, nothing. It was was a real band and a real show. And Skyscraper was, I don't know. He says, I wasn't there. But apparently the duct tape was there. As a matter of fact, one particular band member stepped over it one night and got in all kinds of trouble. That's what I heard. Isn't that interesting? What do you make of that?
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Not surprised at all. But I feel like that's the first time Billy ever brought that up.
Actually brought it up on our podcast.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
I do not remember that. Yeah. Another interesting tale of touring with David Lee Roth.
That's right. And wrapping up Van Halen news is Steve Vai, in addition to touring with Joe Satriani, is going on a King Crimson tour that is called Beat. So this is interesting. King Crimson's beloved 80s albums called Discipline, Beat, and 3 of a Perfect Pair are being brought back to life with this fall tour featuring Steve Vai on guitar, Tool drummer Danny Carey, and Crimson singer-guitarist Adrian Belew, and King Crimson bassist Tony Levin. The Beat tour kicks off September 12th in San Jose, California, wraps up November 8th in Las Vegas. What happened was King Crimson founder Robert Fripp had reanimated King Crimson in 1981 after a 7-year hiatus, and the only members from the 70s version he brought back into the fold was drummer Bill Bruford. He recruited Levin from Peter Gabriel's backing band and Belew from finishing a stint touring and recording with the Talking Heads, and the new lineup gave it a completely different sound. He said this 4-man lineup of King Crimson created these 3 albums in 4 years before splitting up in 1984. So, interesting that Steve is doing a King Crimson tour and Joe is doing a quote-unquote Van Halen tour, right? What do you think of that?
That is awesome.
It is. And that wraps up Van Halen news.
And that's the way it is. Good night.
And we are on to our very exclusive anniversary 100th episode special interview with the one and only Joe Satriani. That's right, Satch is right here on the pod with Dave and I, and we got into all different things Van Halen. We dug deep, folks. We talked about the Sammy tour and the set list and his appearance on Stern. We talked about Jason Newsted and what went down with that botched Van Halen reunion with Alex and Dave. We got into it. We also talked a little bit about his collaboration with Steve Vai and getting into all of that. So this is a great interview. You're not going to miss it. We reached out and got Joe, especially for this particular episode, because we wanted to do something special for you guys, and Joe is the man of the summer because the spotlight's going to be on him because he's got to deliver all those Van Halen songs. So he's the man you want to hear from. But before that happens, we cannot go through this anniversary episode and this 100th episode without giving Dave plenty of mail to deal with so he can get nice and cranky, and that is all coming up next. Take a listen.
We subsist on a heavy diet of starchy foods, candy bars, and
Potato chips.
Coca-Cola, and potato chips. That's the way to survive on the road. And no sleep, of course. You can't sleep, and don't take any vitamins, because otherwise you may get very ill.
That's the Van Halen World Vacation. If you need a dose of VH, get a taste of the closest thing. Romeo Delight, the ultimate Van Halen tribute band, playing all the hits from the David Lee Roth era, first classic 6 albums, plus deep cuts, some of which have never been played live before by the band. They even throw in popular tracks from the Sammy Hagar era and solo hits. The most viewed Van Halen tribute band on YouTube, Romeo Delight, doing customized recreations of staging, instruments, and costumes from the classic Van Halen era. They even perform entire Van Halen albums in sequence. Romeo Delight plays theaters, casinos, summer indoor and outdoor festivals, and special events. They're also available for private parties. To contact them, call Bud Blanche at 215-704-5144. That's 215-704-5144. Or via email at sonicparade1@yahoo.com. Romeo Delight, the ultimate Van Halen tribute band.
Hey, this is Buddy Blanchard from Romeo Delight, America's Van Halen experience. Ow! Wishing Dave and Dave Unchained a happy 8th anniversary and congratulations on your 100th episode. You guys are the best.
Pick up the new book, Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, by Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill. These music journalists share with fans new and old alike a candid, compulsively readable, and definitive oral history of the most influential rock guitarist since Jimi Hendrix. It is based on more than 50 hours of unreleased interviews they recorded with Eddie Van Halen over the years, most of them conducted at the legendary 5150 studios at Ed's home in Los Angeles. The heart of Eruption is drawn from these intimate and wide-ranging talks, as well as conversations with family, friends, and colleagues. In addition to discussing his greatest triumphs as a groundbreaking musician, including an unprecedented dive into Van Halen's masterpiece 1984, the book also takes an unflinching look at Edward's early struggles as a young Dutch immigrant unable to speak the English language, which resulted in lifelong issues with social anxiety and substance abuse. Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, also examines his brilliance, who changed the face of guitar manufacturing. Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen. Get your copy today on Amazon.com.
This is Chris Gill of Guitar World Magazine and co-author of Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen. Hey, I want to congratulate Dave and Dave on their 8th anniversary and 100th episode. Dave and Dave Unchained, it's the only place for the Van Halen community to get the latest news and Van Halen views.
Pick up the new coffee table-sized book, The Decade That Rocked, by legendary rock photographer Mark Weissguy Weiss. This 376-page book has hundreds and hundreds of full-color photos that Weiss shot through the 80s for magazines like Circus, Faces, and Hit Parader, featuring bands like Van Halen, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, and more. There's even behind-the-scenes stories to go with these colorful, eye-popping pictures. The Decade That Rocked, a new book by rock photographer Mark Weiss, is available for purchase now. Go to thedecadethatrocked.com, where there are exclusive bundles available with extra prints, t-shirts, and even patches. Inquire about the Van Halen bundle, especially made for Dave and Dave Unchained listeners. Order today. The Decade That Rocked. It'll rock your world.
Hey, Dave and Dave. It's your old pal, Ronnie James Pio. Hard to believe you've reached 100 episodes. I remember well your early broadcasts and have to say, you two dudes have put a ton of hard work into this gig. I mean, you've been relentless, just dogged in pulling the shows together and getting them out the door like clockwork. So on behalf of all the listeners who get their monthly VH fix from your podcast, I want to say, in my best Casey Kasem, congratulations and many, many returns. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Rock on!
Need a laugh? Check out the Funny How Comedy Podcast, which focuses on upbeat conversations with legendary comedians. It's free on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out on Facebook at Funny How Comedy Podcast, on Twitter at Funny How Podcast, on Instagram at Funny How Comedy Podcast, or email us at funnyhowcomedypodcast@gmail.com.
Hey, this is Derek from Van Halen, the world's most authentic tribute to Van Halen, and I want to congratulate Dave and Dave for their 8th anniversary and 100th episode of the Dave and Dave Unchained podcast. Amazing show. Keep it going, guys.
Author Greg Renoff is back with a new book, Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music. The new biography of the record producer Ted Templeman, who went on to produce Van Halen, the Doobie Brothers, Van Morrison, Aerosmith, Sammy Hagar, and more. The book, which runs $19.95, and it's currently available at Amazon.com. From the man who brought you Van Halen Rising comes Ted Templeman,
A Platinum Producer's Life in Music, written by Templeman as told to Greg Renoff. Available for only $19.95 at Amazon.com. Order it today.
This is Greg Renoff, author of Van Halen Rising. Wanted to say happy anniversary to the Dave and Dave podcast on your 8th year and your 100th episode. Always can count on you guys to keep me and everyone else on the planet Van Halen up to date on the latest and greatest in Van Halen news. Keep at it and rock on.
Originally, Edward and I from Amsterdam, Dave is from Bloomington, Indiana, and Michael's from Chicago, but that's neither here nor there. We got together in California. It started, of course, at the local high school dances.
Actually, in backyard parties.
Yeah, backyard parties.
We used to set up a keg of beer, charge $1, let the kids in. We'd have a friend with a big house and just let all the kids back.
And then we moved the party indoors. We started to rent our own halls. Do the exact same thing. Only instead of charging $1, we charged $2.50 or $3.50. By the time we got the record contract, we could draw 3,000 to 5,000 people, and that was without a manager, without a label, without an agent, without anything. It was just Van Halen putting on their show in a hall. Sooner or later, the people from the record company were bound to notice, which they did. One night we played in a club in Hollywood. And Mo Austin and Ted Templeman came in and said, "Listen, look these papers over, take your time, and see what you think." The next day we signed.
All right, Dave, you know what time it is.
Dave and Dave's mailbag is big and round. Dave says he's tired, can't lift it off the ground. Wants a light bag, likes those the best. And he likes the short mail better than the rest. And he said, well, I think that you're headed for a whole lot of letters. Well, I think that you're headed for a whole lot of letters. Well, I think that you're headed for a boatload of letters. And letter number 1 comes from...
That's right, it's mailbag time again. And we got a cool dozen letters here, and we're going to start with letter number 1, coming from Brandon Wall, a.k.a. Chocolate Slim. He says, I just finished re-listening to your episode covering Brian May and Eddie Van Halen's Starfleet project. Thank you for finally covering this lost gem between two legendary guitar gods at the height of their godly guitar prowess. Now, in Funky Jam, at 4 minutes and 2 seconds, the riff that Ed plays sounds very similar to two 80s classics, She's a Beauty by the Tubes, and I Want a New Drug by Huey Lewis and the News. I'm not saying that Ed ripped them off, considering I Want a New Drug wasn't released until January 3rd, 1984, and She's a Beauty came out around the same time as the Starfleet Sessions was being recorded in April of 83. I think it's a nugget/gem of similarities between the riffs of those songs. Listen to both She's a Beauty and I Want a New Drug and tell me they don't sound similar to Funky Jam. What do you guys think? And he had a 2-part question. The second part says, I got a couple of questions to ask you regarding the music videos for Panama and Hot for Teacher. In Panama, which venue is Van Halen performing when doing both soundcheck and live concert performances? I always heard and thought it was the Spectrum in Philadelphia, but then I read it was in Providence Civic Center and Providence, Rhode Island. Can you help clarify this? Number 2, in Hot for Teacher, I heard that Wayne Gretzky's wife, Janet Jones, is one of the teachers in the Hot for Teacher video. Is that true? The only one I know is Lillian Mueller, who was a former Playboy playmate as well as played a love interest in Rod Stewart's Do You Think I'm Sexy video, and another model by the name of Lori Tucker. Can you please straighten out who the models/video vixens are in the Hot for Teacher video? Stay frosty, happy trails, Brandon Wall, a.k.a. Chocolate Slim. Well, Brandon, first of all, I want to apologize to Brandon. We had to hold his letter from last time. We had so many letters, we were overflowing, so he was nice enough to wait. But you got into the anniversary episode, Brandon, and you're top of the heap here. So we want to say, yes, I hear the similarity of those riffs. And let's just play this right here. Here's Ed's riff from Funky Jam. Now here's the riff from She's a Beauty by the Tubes. And here's the riff from I Want a New Drug by Huey Lewis and the News. The thing here is that riff is very generic. Plus, he's jamming. He's not releasing a song. He's not writing a song. Remember, he's just playing around in the studio. It's not like he's putting anything out. He didn't even know that the whole thing was going to be released. He had no idea. And Funky Jam was a leftover. It wasn't even on the original album. So remember, he's just tooling around. But both came out in 1983. I know you noted that it was January 84 for I Want a New Drug. But that might have been when the single was released, but the album was released in 83. That album took a little while to get going. But this recording, like you said, took place April 83. Now, could Ed have heard those songs and the riff stuck in his head and then he filtered them through the jam? Sure, that's certainly possible. But, no one is really to know. However, the riff wasn't so specific. It was a pretty generic riff. What did you think, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's only so many notes and there's only so many chords, right?
Yeah.
So I really think it's more coincidence than anything else. Or like you said, at best, Ed unconsciously was just playing them because he had heard them or whatever. But really, I think it's coincidence more than anything else.
Absolutely. Now, with the Panama video, that was recorded at the Spectrum in Philadelphia over 2 nights during the 1984 tour, but some shots were taken at the Providence Civic Center in Providence, Rhode Island. So there's clips from both. Now, it's also interspersed with leftover clips of what was the original Jump video. Dave and I talked about this a while ago. The original Jump video had all these crazy clips, and you can see them on YouTube, of like Michael Anthony doing silly stuff, and then Ed playing in the white tuxedo and blowing smoke rings, and Dave fake getting arrested, Dave driving down the street in his lowrider Mercury convertible, him riding a motorcycle. All those little clips that you see were supposed to be in the Jump video, and then they made the Jump video a performance video. That was like sort of a last-minute change, and then they were going to intersplice these things with the performance, and then it didn't make any sense. They went with the performance video, but they had these leftover clips, and they were going to use them, so whoever put the Panama video together was smart. They made it sort of like a crazy party mode, and they showed everybody doing all these crazy clips, although a lot of Michael Anthony's things were left out. They also had one, I don't know if this is in the video, I can't remember, I don't think so, the one where Alex is buried under all the drumsticks. You remember that, Dave? That little video clip where he rises up like a monster out of all these drumsticks. That was one clip.
Is that in the video?
I don't know if it's in the video. I can't remember.
Man, admittedly, I have not
I don't
watched that
think
video.
so. I gotta watch it again. I don't think so. The things that are in the video are Dave getting arrested in his towel, Dave riding in his lowrider Mercury convertible. I think Alex is with him in the car.
And wasn't Dave also riding his motorcycle,
Yeah,
too?
so I was just about to say, Dave riding his motorcycle, Ed smoking the rings while playing piano in the white suit. Valerie's in the background. Valerie's also in the background when Dave gets arrested. There's all those, like, little crazy clips. They must have done the backstage, with a party scene where they all scream Panama. That's sort of probably taken backstage at one of the 1984 gigs. But they made a real nice composite. So they had a lot of material to work with. And when Jump was a huge hit, they followed up with I'll Wait. They didn't do a video for I'll Wait, but they put this Panama video together pretty quick. And then they spent a lot of time putting together the Hot for Teacher video. Now, the Hot for Teacher video, Janet Jones, who many of you might remember from the Flamingo Kid, was not in the Hot for Teacher video. She looks like one of the girls there, but that's not her. You got Donna Rupert, who played the chemistry teacher. She was Miss Canada from, I think, like 1981. And then Lillian Mueller, like you mentioned, she played the phys ed teacher. She's from Norway. She was a 1976 Playmate of the Year. And she was also in Rod Stewart's video, Do You Think I'm Sexy, like you said. She also appeared in Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, Magnum P.I., the Eddie Murphy, Dudley Moore movie, Best Defense, and Remington Steele. So there's that. She was also the star of Dave's Dreams as a 14-year-old child. She starred in that heavily.
Those dreams were very crowded, by the way.
Oh, I know. There's a cast of thousands. My Lord. So, yeah, basically that's the rundown on those. Anything to say on that, Dave?
That's more than I knew, so I think we've covered that in quite the amount of detail. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to make sure that Brandon was satisfied. He gets very testy when I don't pay attention to him.
I think you get an A+ on that one.
Okay. Letter number 2 comes from Tom Miller from Rexford, New York. And he says, hello to the mighty Dave and Dave. I scored tickets to see the Best of All Worlds show in Saratoga, New York on Monday, July 22nd. This week, I decided to check and see where Mammoth was going to be touring this year, and I saw they are performing in Albany, 30 miles away from Saratoga on Sunday, July 21st. And they are not playing a show on the 22nd. Is it possible that Wolf will join Sammy and Mike on stage during their show? Could Sammy join Wolf the night before on his show? Have you heard any rumors about this happening? This would be too good to be true. Am I getting excited at the possibility of this for nothing? As always, thanks for your amazing podcast. Tom Miller, Rexford, New York. Tom, great sleuthing. For sure, that's excellent sleuthing. However, I really think it all depends on where he's headed. Now, I did some sleuthing on my own. The problem is, the next gig that Wolf has is in Richmond, Virginia on July 23rd, which is 8.5 hours away, and he's traveling by bus. That is a long way to travel. I can't imagine that Wolf is going to stick around an entire 24 hours, go to Sam's show to jump on stage for a song, and then travel 8.5 hours to get to Virginia. It would make no sense, and it would probably be irresponsible because they like to get ahead of things and make sure they're in town and ready for sound check and all that stuff. I think it's too close to cut. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble because I know you were excited, and it is an incredible coincidence. And I love that you put that all together. But I also think that he wants to stay away from any Van Halen associations. He's had enough of that drama. I don't think he wants that attention and any of that. So what do you think, Dave?
Well, first of all, yeah, great sleuthing, Tom. I think you're the only one who knows that they're going to be in such close proximity on those days. But like you said, Dave, he's not playing 30 miles away the next night.
No.
He's playing across a few states. So, yeah, that cuts it close.
Yeah, that's a
joke. So, I mean, is it possible? Sure, it's possible. He could do that and then catch a plane, I guess. But I don't think so. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. That's more coincidence than anything. And like you said, Dave, Wolf isn't going out of his way to do anything Van Halen related. Now, would Sammy knock on Wolf's door and say, hey, can I jump on stage tonight? That seems more likely. But then again, I don't know what Sam's itinerary is either, so he's probably pressed for time too.
Well, I will tell you this, though. Wolf said you will never hear a Van Halen song at a Mammoth show. So I don't think he would allow it. I don't think he would do that.
Well, then they'll go on stage and do I Can't Drive 55, right?
Oh,
I mean,
God.
I don't know.
You imagine?
I'm not holding my breath for something like that to happen. Let me just put it to you that way.
He gets up there, he's like, Sunday morning, 9 a.m.
Right.
Oh, my God. All right, letter number 3 comes from Mike Cartledge, again, slightly inebriated in Plimpton, UK. He says, Dave's, not really a question, but I guess I'm asking your opinion, so it's a question. I recently dropped Tokyo Dome Pro footage. It's very open, raw, and revealing. Fantastic to see everyone pretty much exposed. The overwhelming feeling is that of a group of guys having the best time. Dave seems to be bouncing off Wolfgang, and I'm sure it's the way I'd like to remember them. P.S. Why the fuck did Dave have to fuck with the vocal pitch and arrangement? I'll never fucking know. It's like a fucking Tourette's syndrome he has. It's like he'll do anything to sing it, say it or speak it in a wail in a different way or style or pitch. Just sing it the way you sang it back then. Don't try so hard. Thank God we have the original recordings, and I'm the biggest Dave fan in the world. Love you guys. Mike Cartledge, again, slightly inebriated in Plimpton, UK. Yeah, well, here's the thing, Mike. Dave is a bit of a mystery live, and I have studied him closely for years. He certainly has ADD in concert. He loves to dick around with the vocals. This is the most evident on Panama on the Tokyo Dome live recording. He is all over the place in that song. The band is tight as hell. Dave's clowning around, and I think he believes he's being entertaining by doing that, but it doesn't come off very cool. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. And I always wonder, he's having vocal limitations and he's trying to work around them the best he can, and he's not really pulling it off. And or he's taking artistic license, like you said, trying to be creative and trying to mix it up a little bit. But the problem is he's not mixing it up in a positive fashion. Also, like you've said in the past, Dave, he comes out with a Muppet voice. It doesn't do him any favors at best. And at worst, it makes him sound off key. So I think that's just the way Dave likes to do it. No one's going to tell him otherwise. The Tokyo Dome Pro video shottage that you're referring to, I don't think it's on YouTube anymore. I think it was pulled down. But while I was there, it was awesome to see. And again, also, like we've said in the past, this is what they should have done. Yeah. They should have released a video of Tokyo Dome, because Dave, while he has his vocal challenge, is certainly entertaining to watch. And I think that would have taken some of the heat off his vocals if they had released a video and not just the audio. I think at the time they said, well, there was no video, but apparently there was at least this. So I'm not sure what the issue was, other than they probably couldn't come to a meeting of minds to release the video, because that would make sense. And Van Halen doesn't do anything that makes sense. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay. Letter number 4 comes from James Pacheco. And he says, "Hey, Daves, thanks for everything you do. Just wondering if the info you have gotten from Deep Throat seems to be correct, or do you have any evidence of any of that info was wrong?" James Pacheco. Well, I have to say, I re-listened to the episode on Deep Throat, and the person is pretty spot on. A lot of things that the person mentions in that episode was very, very personal and close to Dave, so this wasn't generic material. And like I mentioned before, that person is not someone anybody knows. If I said that person's name, no one would know who they were. I could say the name, it wouldn't help you at all. It would be like saying Jim Smith. It's a very generic name. It's not anybody famous like Rudy Lurin or Pete Angelis. It's not like a Van Halen known person. So that person was definitely close to Dave, and they predicted that he was kind of done touring, and he hasn't really toured. And that person also mentioned that Dave pretty much stays in his house, and he's kind of a private guy and a recluse that doesn't really come out unless he has something to promote. That person also mentions Dave has health issues, which obviously is happening because Dave is kind of hidden in a way, for sure, and we've heard rumblings of things. Dave is sort of an angry guy right now. He's very pissed and upset about certain financial situations. That's going on. Then, of course, the Van Halen reunion that was supposed to come together with Alex. There was a family strife over that. The person talked about that. The feelings that the Van Halen brothers have about Dave versus Sam, that's also in there. That seems to be very clear. I think Alex's book will probably clarify some of this stuff. So, curious to see.
Deep Throat has given us no reason to doubt them, to use a generic pronoun.
Right.
Believe me, we wouldn't have had anyone on the show although this person wasn't on the show, obviously. But we wouldn't have interviewed anybody who we thought was just spouting maybes at best and didn't have decent information. So to answer your question directly, it seems to have been correct. We have no reason to doubt the person. I mean, things change as things happen, but certainly at the time, that was the best information we had. And we believe this person to be correct as far as the information they know. The one caveat I'll throw to that is that the Van Halen universe is always a big maybe, evolving and changing. And it feels like unless you are directly in the band or really in the inner circle of the inner circle, those people are the only one who knows what really is going on. So things can change, even though people may think they know what's going on, but it turns out not so much. We wouldn't have had anyone on the show who was just like, here's my best guess what's going on. I mean, Dave and I already do that. So we don't need anybody else to help us with that. But this person really knew some stuff that we didn't know, and we talked to that person, and, you know, in our opinion, that person wasn't talking out of their butt. So, we think they're reliable as a source of information.
Absolutely. We might have to go back to that person to get a little more clarification about current situations.
Yes.
Letter number 5 comes from, here he is again.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane.
It's Midwest fucking Ron. That's right. It's Midwest fucking Ron. Ron has come out of his castle up on the hill, and he is talking about stuff. So he says here, Dave's, in 2009, Chickenfoot consisted of Hagar, Satriani, Anthony, and Smith. In 2012, Chickenfoot changed drummers and toured as Hagar, Satriani, Anthony, and Aronoff. In 2024, the core group of Chickenfoot, Hagar, Satriani, and Anthony, is going out again with a different drummer, Bonham. But they are not calling themselves Chickenfoot. So when is a band, and when is it just a collection of artists calling themselves whatever they want? Is Mammoth WVH a solo act, or is it a band? He also wanted to note, as you point out, the most likely meaning behind OU812 hand signal is what you stated. However, over the years, it's been said to stand for love, I love you. The gesture of one hand means I love you. I don't know what it means with two hands, but you could say that in the case of Sam and Mike doing it together, it's both of them saying I love you to the audience. If you look up the sign language for the female anatomy, you will see that it is not the OU812 symbol. And he sent us some links. Midwest fucking Ron. So, Mr. Ron, well, you've got a point for sure about the bands, but let's look at it, right? So Hagar, Satriani, Anthony, and Smith were a band. They were Chickenfoot. Hagar, Satriani, Anthony, and Aronoff, well, Kenny Aronoff was just filling in for Smith. You know, he wasn't replacing him. Obviously, Smith had other commitments with Red Hot Chili Peppers, so Kenny stepped in just for the tour. Now, Sam is playing with the Circle, and then, you know, he's got Hagar and Anthony and Vic Johnson and Bonham. But when doing the Van Halen tour, he needed a ringer on guitar. So with all the Eddie Van Halen material, he called upon Joe Satriani to back him up. Make it a glorified supergroup. You know, really, what is it? It's a supergroup backing Sam. They're not Chickenfoot, really, because they're not with Smith. But it is kind of funny because they did play without Smith before with a replacement drummer, so you do have a strong point there. I understand what you're saying. You got a point. Whether it's a Circle, a Chickenfoot, this and that, you know, they're not calling themselves a Circle now either, so because they don't have Vic Johnson. Now, is Mammoth WVH a solo act? In the studio, the answer is yes. On stage, it's very much a band. If you go see them live, you'll certainly get that. And in terms of the OU812 hand symbol, I'm sorry, I've read some stuff. Sam is trying to clean it up and make it more PC in this era for sure. But that's definitely a sexual reference, and I have seen him talk about that many moons ago. Now that he's 77, it looks ridiculously creepy. So, it's about love, you know, come on now. What do you think, Dave?
Well, that wouldn't be the first time Sam tried to backtrack something. So I don't doubt you on that. As far as Mammoth, I mean, the answer is, like you said, he's both. He's definitely a solo act, But obviously he can't be playing everything at the same time while he's doing it live. So he needs a band. Prince was the same way early on in his career.
Right.
You know, before there was Prince and the Revolution
Right.
or Prince and the New Power Generation
Right.
or whatever, right? Or even Foo Fighters at first. Same exact setup. So for some reason, some solo acts like a band name in case they want to invite people in or out. They can. If it doesn't work out, it's not a problem because everybody knows who the head honcho is. I mean, that was Whitesnake for years.
Oh, yeah.
So David Coverdale, I mean, he could give a whole class on that. And as far as what should the band call themselves when they're mostly Chickenfoot, they are going to call themselves whatever sells the most tickets and looks the best on the marquee.
Right.
Right? I mean, look, you got 3/4 of Chickenfoot. You've got 3/4 of the Circle. You've
half
got
of Van Halen.
Van Halen. Right, exactly. Exactly. But that is why it is exactly, what's he calling it? The best of all worlds.
Well, that's the name
Right?
of the tour. I think he's just calling it Sammy Hagar, though.
Well, it is. Technically, it's a Sammy Hagar tour. But the name of the tour is the Best of All Worlds tour.
Right.
So, yeah, it's all those bands. It just so happens that Joe has worked with him in the past in another band, and Michael Anthony was in that band, too. They travel in the same circles.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, do you want to look at it as Chickenfoot with yet another drummer? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. No problem. But they're certainly not going to bill themselves that way because I think this way they'll sell more tickets.
Absolutely. So letter number 6 comes from Han Belcher, which is Casey Alfred. He's always changing his name there. So I'm going to ask a little patience from my partner Dave here because
no, you have got to edit this letter.
No, but
now,
it's impossible because of the way it follows. It's kind of impossible to cut down. But let me do it very quick. I'm going to do it very, very quick.
You're killing me,
I know.
Smalls.
I know. But listen to me. The reason why I say this is a very, very unique letter, and it's pretty creative. So let me do it real quick. So letter number 6, hey Dave and Dave. This is going to get real nerd Halen, so please indulge me. Much has been made of Adam Sandler's girlfriend in The Wedding Singer jinxing the band and causing Van Halen's breakup. However, I have another theory. I suggested it was Marty McFly in Back to the Future trilogy who caused the riff. Having traveled back in time in 1955 disguised as Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, Marty played a tape labeled Edward Van Halen of music from the Wildlife soundtrack, Out of the Window, the name of the song, for his father-to-be. This caused some major ripples in the time, including changing Marty's appearance from Eric Stoltz, who is in the Wildlife, to Michael J. Fox, although somehow his mother, played by Leah Thompson, is spared. Once 1984 rolls around, George takes Marty to see the Wildlife at a theater where they hear the track Out of the Window. This sends chills down George's spine as he begins to question his entire reality. Frantically, he tracks down the Wildlife soundtrack creator, one Edward Van Halen, whose band has just earlier that year released an album entitled 1984 with obvious allusions to George Orwell's novel of the same name, and a recently released movie adaptation. As a budding sci-fi writer himself, his world just comes spiraling down. George then begins to harass and threaten Edward, thinking it was he who had visited him some 30 years ago, giving him the scare of his life, though he was only just born earlier that same year. The newspaper headlines then reads, George McFly committed for his actions. This in turn puts Edward into a very precarious state, who is already at odds with his lead singer, which causes the inevitable demise of the band. It gets worse. Marty's antics in Back to the Future 2 create an even stranger reality. Here, not only has the bully Biff taken over the now post-apocalyptic town, but things are so messed up that the biker gangs are listening to Sammy Hagar as if he was cool. Ouch. In this reality, a fragile Edward hires Sammy, who's got the cachet to front the band, and the rest is history. It's not clear how Sam got the word that Marty's DeLorean can't drive 55 back in 55. he was stranded there, but that is a story for another time. But seriously, through where did Marty get the music for the cassette tape? As far as I know, most of the soundtrack was never available for years. And is that Alex on drums, or is it all Ed, like the label tape suggests? Sincerely losing his mind, Han Belcher, a.k.a. Casey Alford. So, wow, I thought that was pretty creative and wild. Han, Casey, whatever the hell your name is, that was really, really funny. I think you got a screenplay in there, my friend. I love the creativity. I think the tape was supposed to be like a bootleg or something. That was my sort of guess. It clearly wasn't an album, and that is Ed on drums, I believe, Dave, isn't it?
I believe you are correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, what did you think of his theory here?
Well, interesting story, but I think in a movie that's about time travel, the last thing I'm going to ask is where Marty got the tape from. There's a lot of other things going on there. But great story, great theory, great original thinking. I think you definitely have a future as a screenwriter. But you got to condense those letters a little shorter, Casey. That was a little long.
Dave's not used to long things.
Well, hey, watch it. But hey, points for creativity, and maybe Marty was part of the Van Halen inner circle at the time.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe Val slipped him a tape or something. Who knows?
Well, there you go.
Letter number 7 comes from Mario Aguilera III from J-Town, Illinois. And he says, I've got a question I've always been a little confused about. The lyrics in Van Halen songs. My question is on classics like Runnin' with the Devil, Ain't Talk About Love, Jump, Dance the Night Away, Unchained. The credits are mostly to Dave and Edward. Now we know Ed is doing all the guitar work, but is Ed actually writing the lyrics as well with Dave, or is it only Dave writing the lyrics? We all know how out there Dave really is, and he's an amazing lyricist. Just wondering how much lyrical content Ed was contributing. My other question is, on the last episode you mentioned there were rumors that Dave wants royalties changed up or redone. My assumption is he only wants this done since Ed is no longer with us, also meaning that he doesn't think Wolf should get what he's getting, because honestly Wolf had nothing to do with those songs as they were produced well before he was even born. The way I see it, if this is true, Dave has a point here. Wolf has absolutely nothing to do with those songs. However, the royalties from the album sales and streaming should be left alone because these are per Ed's wishes in his will, and I would assume for royalties to be received by whoever Ed chooses, the obvious choice being his son. I'm assuming this all goes under everything that Wolf gets inherited. Ed's fortune, his home, his possessions, guitars, gear, all the future revenue generated from everything Van Halen and EVH brand. Obviously, if rumors are true, this is one of all the things that Dave, Al, and Wolf are dealing with now. No A Different Kind of Truth on streaming, no Dave versions of VH songs on streaming, no EVH tribute. Obviously, these are things the public never gets to see, the dollars and cents of it all. But it's so interesting to know these things. Thanks a lot. You guys rule. Mario Aguilera III from J-Town, Illinois. Well, Mario, I want to tell you that Ed never writes the lyrics, only Dave. For sure. That's for sure. That's all Dave. Ed doesn't write lyrics. Now, the rumor is that Dave wants to up his percentage, but Wolf gets what Ed gets, and that's not going to move. That is in his inheritance. So you can't start redesigning the lines because you don't like it. Whether Ed is alive or dead, he gets his share. And if he's not here, then his son gets his share. So it's pretty clear. Maybe Dave doesn't like it. Maybe it pisses him off, but there's really nothing he can do about that. What do you think, Dave?
No, I agree. In fact, there's another letter later on that touches this,
yeah,
which answers it the way I would. So
okay.
I'm going to hold off on a detailed answer until we get to that next letter.
Yeah.
But for now, the short story is, yeah, I agree with you, Dave, in that David Lee Roth, too bad, so sad. Like, that's how it works. I'm sorry that it doesn't work the way you want it to, but nobody else in the band is going to renegotiate the deal because you don't like how the new math is.
Yeah.
That's a you problem, not a them problem. And you're dealing with someone, Alex, who is so stubborn. He would sooner not give anybody in the band any money than give you more than your share. And Dave Lee Roth, you should know that by now. So good luck to you, pal. That's all I got to say. And yeah, I mean, Eddie, I am unaware of him writing a lyric ever. I mean, maybe there's some kind of isolated instance that I can't be thinking of right now.
I can think of one. He sort of helped on Humans Being. He came up with the title, and Sammy has even admitted this. I guess Sammy was sort of stuck. Ed helped him like a little bit or something just to get him going, and then Sam did the whole song. But apparently Ed came up with the title Humans Being.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I mean, there you go. But as a general rule, Ed does not write the lyrics at all. In fact, he was infamous for, there was always one song he could never remember the words to the chorus he had to sing, and he had to tape them to his pedal board in order to remember them. It was a David Lee Roth era song. I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, Ed would always say, oh, I never listened to the lyrics. I don't care. I don't pay attention, until later on in the Sammy era when apparently Ed was finally starting to listen to the lyrics and was like, you got to come up with something better. Was that just an excuse to kick out Sam? Who knows? But either way, lyrics were not a priority for Ed.
For sure. Letter number 8 comes from Scott James, and he's got a nice short one here, Dave. He says, hey guys, was the music at the end of this month's podcast the Starfleet project? Scott James. He's talking about last month, which was March. No, Scott, that was not Starfleet. That was a live version of As Is from Soundcheck from 2012, instrumental. Now, As Is, one of my favorite tracks from A Different Kind of Truth, was worked up by the band live, but I don't believe Dave tackled it. But I know the band worked it up because they really love that song, but they did a really cool instrumental version, which I tacked on this. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, you're right about that. I don't think they ever did it as part of a show live with vocals. But there was like 1 or 2 songs, including that one, they worked up in Soundcheck and trying to convince Dave to do, but they were never able to do during a proper show.
Dave was obsessed with Chinatown. Nothing against Chinatown. I love Chinatown, but like he would not move that from the set. I think he did Blood and Fire a couple of times.
Yes.
But he didn't really like exchange a lot of A Different Kind of Truth songs in and out of the set. He did Tattoo and She's the Woman, but Chinatown was constantly Chinatown. I don't know, As Is, I guess, didn't tickle his fancy or whatever, but it's really, really, I love that song. I think that song is amazing.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Letter number 9 comes from Louise in UK. Dave, a little feminine energy here, and she says, oh my God, we have finally gotten the truth. I feel the Alex Van Halen Steve Rosen interview part 6 on YouTube talks about the band split. I feel so sorry for the Van Halen brothers because it was Dave who wasted 6 months robbing them of time when he was making his EP and then blamed Alex's drinking for the reason he was refusing to work on the next album with Van Halen. After years of lies, rumors, bullshit snippets that didn't make any sense, we finally get Al's explanation, which is the key missing piece of the jigsaw. Dave quit the band, thinking they would beg him and wait. Dave tried to sue them afterwards, but Al says all the lawyers got involved to legally separate the band. Al doesn't mention when Ed turned down Dave and refused to write all the music for the soundtrack for A Crazy from the Heat movie. So the brothers did know that Dave was working on it to some extent. I believe Al's version of events because it fits what I've heard over the years, and they sound so hurt. It's Dave's own fault that his solo career flopped after the second album and then completely died off, making him irrelevant until 2007. Alex was right. Everything he said about Dave and his lack of business acumen and superiority complex. The bros knew him inside out. Just as years ago, Dave Company, Inc., the original, went bust. Everything Dave gets involved with is very short-lived. He can't stick to anything. He left Van Halen only to perform VH cover songs on his own for decades without them. A very unwise move. What are your thoughts on what Al said? Thanks for taking the time to read this. And sorry, Dave, that it's so long. Love your podcast every month. Louise from the UK. Okay, Louise. Well, this interview that Steve Rosen did with Alex Van Halen was for the book that he was writing on Eddie Van Halen, so it was sort of to parlay into that, and he released this 6-part interview with Alex Van Halen, who, by the way, is very angry. Now, the brothers claim that they were really mostly pissed off about the 6 months. They knew, he said, about the Crazy from the Heat album, didn't seem to care. But then when he dragged it out and he started making videos and doing promotions and going on talk shows and doing all this spotlighty shit, that really pissed them off because they were sitting, waiting in the studio to get something going, and Dave was delaying. Now, they didn't seem to be too upset about the record, but more about the showboating. The most telling thing, though, is how Al said that Ted was calling Dave an asshole behind the scenes, but he ended up producing Dave's album, Eat 'Em and Smile. So I don't know what's going on here. You know, there's so much drama in this band, it's insane, and I know that Alex was pissed off, but he was saying Roth can't sing, Roth can't this. I mean, he was just trashing the living shit out of Dave. Obviously, it's 1985, you're at the height of the soreness, for sure, but I think that Al felt like Dave had no right to be dragging his ass and delaying the band. But, you know, he actually said to Steve on the tape, which is interesting, Dave, I don't know if you caught this. He says, I have tape of Dave singing the Sammy songs, and I'll play them to you side by side, and you tell me what you think. Now, can you imagine hearing that? My head was blown off when I heard that.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the key tidbits.
Oh, yeah. That was
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which is interesting.
But, you know, they're somewhere in his house, I guess, or at 5150 Studios.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, it was fascinating listening and really a great preview of what we're going to get from the book.
Well, we hope.
Yes, well, we hope. Well, that's true. Because, number one, we hope that the book covers the topics Alex was talking about in this interview.
Yeah.
And I hope Alex remembered everything again.
Well, you got to remember, this is 40 years ago.
No, I get that. But I had said this before, is that I wonder if Alex or his co-writer was listening to these interviews and saying to themselves, oh, man, I completely forgot about that. That would have been really good for the book. So I wonder if there's some of that. But anyway, regardless of that, yeah, Al was very angry, very bitter, still very sore. So there's a lot of Dave jabs going in on there. But Luis, like you do say, it does confirm some things we thought about over the years, fills in some holes, because Al, for the most part, is a straight shooter kind of guy. He tells it like it is, whether you like it or not. Ed was also similar in that way. And I think what you hear, what you see, what you get is the most part. Now, Al was also really like at the height of his drinking at that time, too.
Yeah.
And Dave himself has been on record to say that when it came to the breakup, Dave didn't necessarily break up because Al was drinking too much, but he did say to Ed, your brother is up to 2 6-packs a day.
Cases, I thought he said.
Cases. Sorry, no, you're right. You're right. Sorry, I didn't even get it right. Your brother is up to a couple of cases a day. And he's implying, like, is he still functioning?
Right.
Can he function at that level? Is he going to live if he keeps drinking at that level? Like, that's above and beyond really drinking. And so it was, at the least, it was a concern for Dave. It definitely was a factor.
Yeah.
But there's two sides to every story. The
Right.
truth is somewhere in the middle. And now you've got 4 people in the band. I'm sure they all have some different kind of story. But I think the fact of the matter of it is the following. Did Dave walk away from the band? Yes, he did. Did he think he could walk back into the band pretty easily? I'm willing to bet he did.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he underestimated the fact that Ed and Al and Mike, to a lesser extent, were like, okay, bye, see ya. We're getting a new lead singer. We're not waiting for you. You are replaceable.
Yeah.
So I think that was an eye-opener and sobering moment for Dave. But, you know, he rolled the dice and he lost. So, oh well, too bad, so sad.
But the question is this is the thing I always wondered, was he getting nervous about the material that Ed was writing? Now, remember how hard he suffered with I'll Wait and needed help from Michael McDonald. Now, the song came out great, and he did a great job on it, but he struggled writing that song and had to, you know, go to Michael McDonald for some help. So my question is, when you get stuff like Love Walks In or Why Can't This Be Love, is he like, what am I going to do with this? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head, Dave.
Yeah.
I think that, at the least, was a contributing factor
Yeah.
to him leaving. Because he sees this new music coming in, and he's like, oh, man, what am I going to do with this? And even if I could do something with this, is this something I really want on a Van Halen album? I'm just not getting it. That coupled with the fact that he's working on a movie, he thinks it could be a movie star.
Oh, yeah.
His ego is in overdrive. There's lots of booze and cocaine. Everybody wants a piece. The brothers are getting on his nerves. And all these little things, he's like, maybe I'll try and reach out on my own because my solo EP is doing really well. So I think it's time for a solo move. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think he heard the new stuff and it really wasn't moving him, quite frankly. And that was at least a reason why he left.
I think those tapes would probably tell us a lot. If Alex said that, it's so interesting that he said that to Steve, because I remember when I interviewed Alex in like 98 and I was asking him about In the Midnight Hour. He's like, oh yeah, I have the tapes right here. I'll play them for you. And I was like, oh my God. But he was like that in the sense that I almost feel like his attitude was like, you want to hear Dave on the new stuff? I'll play you the tapes because they sound like Dave.
Oh, no, I'm sure there are tapes.
Yeah.
I'm also sure Alex is like really leaning heavy into you should hear it next to Sammy's stuff because Sammy's stuff is great and Dave's stuff sucks.
Right.
I mean, he's definitely taking that angle.
Yeah.
And there might be an element of truth to that, but you got to remember Sam's stuff is the final version and Dave's stuff is a working demo.
Yeah.
So it's almost not fair to compare the two.
Right, but let's be honest. Sam's voice fit more what Ed was going in. The direction he was going in totally fit Sam's style. So it was like a suit that he put on and you're like, oh, I can.
No, I hear you, but I'd still be curious to hear what Dave was doing with it.
Oh,
and if it's really not that
so
good, then your point is well taken. He was having trouble working with the material.
Right.
And if you can't work with the material with your bandmates, then what are you doing working with them?
Exactly. Letter number 10 comes from Jason Campbell from Nashville. And he says, I enjoyed last month's discussion about AI versions of what Dave would sound like singing Sammy-era songs. The problem I have with these mashups is you really can't have Dave singing Sam's lyrics. It just doesn't make sense and wouldn't give a true representation of what Dave would have sounded like on post-1984 Van Halen. A better representation, although still somewhat flawed, would be to take Dave's lyrics for something like Going Crazy and put it into the instrumental track of Why Can't This Be Love or whatever song. You get the idea. This way, you would get what was going on in Dave's head at the time along with the music that Ed was making at the time. And I'm sure smarter people than I can figure this out, how to do it with AI, but to me, that would be more of a truer version of what it would have sounded like in an alternative universe where Dave never left Van Halen. Anyways, keep up the good work. Love the show. Jason Campbell from Nashville. Well, Jason, I agree. The problem is that doesn't make any sense because I don't know if you can bend lyrics and melodies for one song onto another. That's sort of tricky business. This was just sort of a fun thing because the song is already known. Even if Dave is on Why Can't This Be Love, with the lyrics and the melodies would be totally different. It would be called something different. The lyrics would be different. The melodies would be different. I think they could have done it better too. I gotta be honest with you. I think it really could have sounded cool had they done a better job. I really think that they should have gone with, like, finish what you started, get up, best of both worlds, good enough, pound cake, top of the world. I could actually see that happening. And I'm actually going to predict, I think you're going to see it happen through AI, not through actual Van Halen. But I think somebody is going to make it a lot more Dave-like. This guy, whoever did the Why Can't This Be Love version, he started to sound a little like Dave, and then it just went off the rails. It didn't have the yelps. It didn't have the phrasing that Dave would do. I mean, you could totally hear it. But Why Can't This Be Love is not exactly the song I would have used. But Dave could certainly sing those other songs. Interesting. What do you think, Dave?
AI. Still not perfect.
Oh, no.
Be careful what you ask.
Oh, I know.
You might get it. I understand what Jason is saying, and conceptually, it'd be an interesting experiment, but man, that's tough to implement. But we'll see, because it's so funny. We have AI now, and you think we would use AI to be like, hey, AI, find a cure for cancer.
Exactly.
But no, we're using AI. Hey, AI, put David Lee Roth's vocals on a Sammy Hagar song.
Right, exactly.
Right? Like, that's what we're doing with it. So the great promise of AI, well, we'll see what happens. You know, the big fear right now is AI is going to take everyone's jobs away. So I'm not worried about it slapping someone else's vocal line on a song. But I tell you, I see more and more of that stuff popping up every day on YouTube with different bands. And the next year, we're going to see some more Van Halen stuff like this.
Here's my question, Dave. Do we see Sammy's voice on Van Halen 3?
Oh, well, I think that's at the bottom of the list, honestly, because I don't think anybody's really going out of their way to doing anything on Van Halen 3.
Well,
I thought you were going to ask, are we going to see Sammy's vocals on some David Lee Roth stuff? And I could see that happening. I think that will happen before anybody messes around with 3.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear. Anyway, regardless, letter number 11 comes from Eric Torbick, the perfect letter writer from New Jersey. And he says, do you guys believe Dave's story about Intruder? Dave claims he wrote Intruder because the Pretty Woman video needed extra music. And while it sounds like a cool story, I find it hard to believe, especially 1982, that Ed played music that Dave wrote. But I've never heard Ed say anything to dispute Dave's version. What do you guys think? Eric Torbick, the perfect letter writer from New Jersey. Well, I have to be honest with you, Eric. I always heard that David Lee Roth came to Ed and said he needed a 1:40 piece of music to fill out the video. And that's what Ed gave him. I don't remember ever hearing that Dave wrote the music because it's got drums and guitar and bass on there. How is that coming from Dave? Did you hear this?
I haven't heard that explicitly, but I know where Eric is coming from because Dave played the keyboards on that song. Very rare for Dave, but he did play the keyboards. So maybe he played the keyboards part, and so maybe he did the outline of that, because really, it's basically just Alex doing a drum beat and Ed just wailing strange guitar sounds all over the place, while Dave has this keyboard piece.
But this is the keyboard piece.
No, I know, but look, someone's got to write it. I mean, Ed's guitar parts aren't exactly a song. It's just him doing crazy solos or sound effects. So it could very well be Dave writing that. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't think it's outside the limits of the imagination.
I'm wondering if it's something that Don and Ted pieced together in the studio. That's what I'm wondering.
Maybe. Could be. I don't know. I mean, that's a great question for Ted Templeman or Don Landy if we ever get them on the show.
Yeah, good luck.
I mean, but look, it was certainly a last-minute addition. They had this video. They needed something longer. So one way or another, they came up with 1:40 plus of sounds that lead right into Pretty Woman.
Well, that's true. Letter number 12, the last letter of the night. Dave's absolute favorite comes from Kurt 5150 Snyder. And he says, Van Halen split songwriting and publishing royalties 4 equal ways on A Different Kind of Truth, with Ed, Alex, Dave, and Wolfgang. After Ed's passing, Wolfgang and Janie split Ed's estate, and Wolfgang received 100% of the EVH brand and Edwards royalties associated with Van Halen. I heard through the grapevine that the main reason that A Different Kind of Truth album is tied up in legalities is because David Lee Roth is requesting to have all the songwriting and publishing royalties on that album to be split 3 ways instead of 4 ways. And Wolf is receiving his 25% and his father's 25%. It's hard telling if Alex is approving this request or if it's just Dave wanting this split to happen. David Lee Roth's recent response and public videos aimed at the living Van Halens tells me that this isn't going well, where the remaining parties can't agree on what is fair. To my understanding, streaming doesn't bring in the expected amount of money that it should, but it is the future, and every band has to conform to that platform to complement their brand and sell physical copies of the albums. In my opinion, Wolf should receive Ed's legal royalties that were granted to him, and tying this album up in legal contract disputes only hurts the band. Your thoughts thoughts. Kurt, 5150 Snyder. Well, I think that Dave is not going to get too far with this. I don't know about the Janie thing. I don't know what she got. All I know is Wolf owns the house. Wolf owns 5150. Wolf owns EVH brand, I think, with Matt Bruck. And he also gets Ed's royalties. So I don't know what Janie got. I mean, that's all personal shit, so I have no idea. Now, the problem is this is just not gonna happen. I mean, you could wish all you want, but this is not gonna happen. What I don't understand about this whole fucking thing is, where is the record company in all of this? Like, how do you just take a record off the table? I've never heard of this. I've never heard of a band parking an album. I mean, if you're the record company and you have a major band like Van Halen and you have an album that you could be making money on and they're sidelining it, I would be like, are you out of your fucking mind? They would start suing David Lee Roth for not signing the contract. That's absolutely ridiculous. He agreed to the contract that is there. Now, if Ed dies and he leaves his shares to his son, okay, well, that happens in all parts of life. This is not unique to this situation. I'm sorry that he doesn't like that Wolf gets Ed's share, but Ed's not here, and Ed's share has got to go to somebody, and that's his only child. So if he's getting half the money, what's the difference? I mean, it really has nothing to do with Dave. It's not his business. So, I mean, I just don't understand how Dave can hold this whole train up and he be such a bitch that he doesn't allow this album to be part of the catalog. I mean, we don't even have 40 Van Halen albums. We have like a dozen, and you're going to take one away? What the fuck are you doing? I mean, it's just crazy. So what do you think?
So first of all, this is if Dave's beef is really about the percentages. We really don't know that for a fact. But to your point, is he really so upset with the fact that Wolf is now getting more than him through the inheritance, that he wants it to be split a third and a third and a third, instead of what effectively would be a quarter, a half, and a quarter? Like, you don't see Al worried about this. So it just so happens that the guy who inherited Ed's estate was also a member of the band. Like, that could have easily been Al. Would Dave have thrown a fit if Al had inherited that? If this is true, and this is a big if, we don't know, but if it is, like you said before, Dave, like, too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Like, if Dave had said, I want all my royalties to go to charity, would that have been a problem? I mean, Ed can do whatever he wants with his estate.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, the math doesn't work for another member of the band who's getting less than Ed's son now. But you got to remember, the dad's not around anymore.
Yeah.
And there's no amount of money you can put on that. That's irreplaceable.
Right.
So stop crying about it. And where do you get the chutzpah, if this is true, but to ask for a bigger percentage? I mean, come on. And by the way, this all assumes that Wolf is getting 25%. Did he really get 25%? Because, I don't know. I always thought that maybe like Dave and Ed and Al would get, like a bigger chunk of it. Like they get 90% and split it 30-30-30 and give Wolf 10 because, he's the newbie or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean,
hey, listen, Ron Wood was paid as a lesser member of the band for like 30 years.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I get it. So this is all like a big maybe and supposition, but it all boils down to money. At the end of the day, if something goes wrong, it's almost always about money. And if somebody in the band really wants to hold things up and get zero as opposed to something, all right, well then that's your business. But please remember, this was Ed's last released recorded work, and it was a decent piece of recorded work. I know people have their opinions about that album, but at the least it wasn't Van Halen 3. So for that reason alone, A Different Kind of Truth should be released because it was the last piece of Ed's musical legacy. And the only thing that ever mattered to Ed was the music. And for his bandmates, not to release the music is a slap in the face to his memory and legacy. And that's all I got to say about that.
But the question is what I want to know, aside from all this pitter-patter, is who fucking owns this album? Which record company owns it? Does Interscope own this? No one really knows. Did Warner Brothers buy it back to keep it in the Van Halen catalog? There's a missing piece there. I don't know what it is, but there's a missing piece. It really pissed me off that they went to Interscope for that album because they fucked that up royally. The way they promoted it, it was piss poor, the way the whole thing was rolled out and handled. This is the first album back with David Lee Roth, and they just did nothing with that momentum. Really.
No, I hear you, but they didn't have a deal with Warner Brothers anymore, and apparently Warner didn't want them back, so here comes another record label offering them decent money.
Okay, but my question is...
what would you do?
But my question is that this is where I get confused. If you remember, way back when Ray Daniels was negotiating a new contract with Warner Brothers, right at the time when Sammy Hagar, left the band, where was that contract? I don't quite understand.
Well, I don't know. Happened. You'd have to ask Warner Brothers because somewhere along the line, they dropped Van Halen.
I know. And I also heard, again, we've talked about this on the podcast. I don't know if this is true, what the story is or whatever. However, I know that there was some sort of renegotiation about the Van Halen's contract, and I know that Best Of that came out in 1996, that apparently was incredibly lucrative for the band. That sold millions of copies and went into the charts and did some decent numbers and stuff. And they made a boatload off of that because that was part of the new contract. And they made a killing off of that. Obviously, Van Halen 3 was part of that. But then I also heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I would love to know, that they handed in another album with Gary Cherone, and it was rejected from Warner Brothers. This is the rumor. A lot of people are saying that's being hidden. That Warner Brothers saying, we're not going to release this, and that is why Gary left the band. But it's not like they threw Gary out. It's not like Gary told them to go screw themselves and left. It was sort of like a mutual parting, and it was a very strange ending. They didn't just end with Gary after Van Halen 3 didn't take off. They went right back into the studio and started recording. This is what I want Mike to clear up if we ever speak to Mike, because that would be great. What happened after that tour? What was the momentum? What was the deal? But the rumor is that they were sort of in a good way band-wise. If you ever hear Gary talk about the tour, that they kind of gelled together as a band, and apparently they went and wrote a whole bunch of songs, some of which Eddie Trunk had heard and said that it was way better than Van Halen 3 and that it was going in the right direction, but Warner Brothers apparently rejected it. They weren't going to release another Van Halen album with Gary Cherone. And if that was the case, then they had to part ways. But then everything just unraveled from there. That was the end. Van Halen didn't do anything. The only other thing that they did with Warner Brothers was put out another Best Of in 2004. Apparently, they wanted to do a full album with Sam when he came back into the band, but they didn't have enough time. So they ended up just getting through 3 songs and then stuck that on a Best Of. And the thing is that the times were different. Sales in 2004 were totally different than sales in 1996. Record sales were still strong in 96. They were selling CDs and downloads of this and that. So that was really going. But once 2004 hit, they certainly sold into the platinums for Best of Both Worlds, the 2-disc volume Best Of there. However, it wasn't as lucrative as the Best Of Volume 1. In fact, they were supposed to put out a Best Of Volume 2. And I don't know whatever happened with that. Well, actually, you know why? It was probably because they changed singers. That's probably why. Because, then Gary came into the band and was like, what are we going to do? Release a Best Of? Reminding everybody about Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth? That didn't make any sense. Then they were going to release an all Roth greatest hits. This was right around 2007, and I don't know what happened with that. They were going to do it. I heard that they even had it put together.
I think the tour got postponed.
Well, that's when Eddie went into rehab, and they got postponed. Because if I remember correctly, all of that was lining up with the band getting into the Hall of Fame, which was the early portion of 07. And then the tour got pushed towards the fall of 07, and everything became sort of a mishmash. And that Greatest Hits got shelved. There was a Greatest Hits of David Lee Roth era songs that was shelved. Apparently, Volume 2 was shelved from the best of, and then they ended up coming out with the best of both worlds in 04.
Do you have a point to all this?
Well, the point is to inform our listeners about the backstage kind of stuff that was happening. You're just cranky because it's late. All right, that's it. We're wrapping up. Well, that wraps up the mailbag segment. And we are on to our interview with Joe Satriani, who is going to be playing guitar on the Best of All Worlds tour with Sammy Hagar this summer. We talked to Joe about all the different intricacies of how that tour came together, as well as what happened with the whole botched David Lee Roth, Alex Van Halen reunion that was supposed to happen back years ago with Jason Newsted. And that's all coming up next. Take a listen.
The music kind of speaks, or our goofing around. We joke so much about things. I asked my Mom, what are the ingredients for pound cake? And she goes, why? I said, well, I'm writing a song about pound cake. She goes, oh, well, you use a pound of sugar and a pound of everything's a pound, right? Equal ingredients. And I said, okay, thanks, Mom. And then she wanted to hear the song. I said, sure, I played it for her. She's going, well, gee, I can't really hear the words.
Take a trip to the rock concerts of the 80s in this new full-color 300-page book, Pictures Alive, filled with never-before-seen photos. Go back and see the mighty Van Halen at their peak from two amazing concerts in 1982 and 1984, plus photos from Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth solo tours, and many other bands of the day. Filled with amazing photos, classic stories, original ticket stubs, and more. If you're a fan of Van Halen, you will not be disappointed. Hit the ground running with Pictures Alive, the new book, now available at picturesalive.net. That's picturesalive.net. picturesalive.net. Get it today.
This is Jake Miller from Completely Unchained, and I'd like to say congratulations to Dave and Dave on your 8th anniversary, 100th episode of the podcast. If you're a fan of Van Halen, make sure you listen to Dave and Dave on their Van Halen podcast. Those guys are the best. Love you, man.
Martin Popoff here. Hope you're enjoying this latest episode of Dave and Dave Unchained, the wise swamis on all things VH. Just wanted to remind you that at martinpopoff.com, I've got 2 Van Halen books that I wrote. One is Van Halen, a visual biography, which is basically a big hardcover coffee table book, 400 images, 20,000 word detailed timeline. And the other one is called Unchained, a Van Halen user manual. It's the sort of 120,000 word, very academic, a lot of crazy chapters, a lot of trivia, wordy book that I did on Van Halen. So yes, go to martinpopoff.com. I sign and ship those out of my office here in Toronto. There's PayPal buttons for the US, international, and Canada. Again, Van Halen, a visual biography, and Unchained, a Van Halen user manual. Back to Dave and Dave.
Martin Popoff here, folks. Author of Unchained, a Van Halen user manual, Van Halen, a visual biography, and Van Halen at 50. Coming soon, I want to congratulate Dave and Dave on their 100th episode and 8th anniversary. Very cool. The Van Halen Whispers. Lord, strike those poor boys down.
If you would like to send us a letter asking a question or making a statement or whatever you'd like to say, you can send it to ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.
Midwest Ron here. Congratulations to Dave and Dave on your 8th anniversary and Sammy Math 100th episode. Sammy Math because there's those 2-parters from the early days, plus an episode or 2 without numbers. And who can forget about the infamous number 57A? You passed number 100 months ago. All ribbing aside, you guys do great job keeping on top of everything from a band that will sadly never be heard from again. So, stay the course. Don't let anyone give you any crap. And I just wanted to let you guys know. Ha! Rock on and...
Looking forward to the next 100 plus.
The long-awaited Van Halen book from legendary rock journalist Steve Rosen is here. Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. This is an over 400-page odyssey of Rosen's decades interviewing and being friends with the late guitar god, Eddie Van Halen. Rosen says, I spent 14 long, hard months writing Tone Chaser. It was both the most difficult story I've ever written and the most rewarding. I wanted to be honest and transparent as I possibly could, which was not always an easy thing to do. In the end, this was the most complete and comprehensive book I could have possibly written. There was nothing left to say when I reached the last page. With every word I wrote, I was reminded of the time I spent with Edward, and that hurt terribly. But it also brought back what a remarkable experience that was, and how insanely lucky I had been to have ever known him, and astonishingly to have been friends with him. I hope you can feel everything I felt. That is the purpose of this book. Pre-sales are currently going on now for the self-published book. PayPal Steve directly at scrosen@sbcglobal.net. That's scrosen@sbcglobal.net. It's $47 for those who are buying it inside the U.S., and that includes shipping. $95 for those who are buying it overseas, and that includes shipping. Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. Don't miss out. Order it today.
Hi, this is Steve Rosen, author of Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. A huge freaking rock and roll congratulations to Dave and Dave Unchained on their unbelievable 8th anniversary and 100th episode, a milestone by anybody's imagination. I've been lucky enough to be part of the Dave and Dave crusade, man, and I am truly thrilled and honored by it. They have had my back regarding my Tone Chaser book from the very beginning, and my hat's off to them. They are the first blast in all things any Van Halen person would want to know, and the Van Halen community and the Van Halen nation owes them a big thank you, man, for keeping the fire alive and for keeping the Van Halen banner flying high. So to Dave and Dave, I bow to you, I thank you, and keep rocking, and we'll talk to you on your 16th anniversary, guys. See ya.
Hello, loyal listeners. Wanted to let you know about our new Patreon. If you like what we do and you have the means, drop us a donation to keep the podcast going. Go to patreon.com/DD Unchained. That's patreon.com/DDUNCHAINED. Any size contributions are greatly appreciated. We have special packages to those who donate $45 or more. You'll get the Unchained package. Trust me, it's worth it. Contribute $65 or more and you can get the Romeo Delight package, which is Unchained plus more. $95 or more scores you the Top Jimmy package, which is the kitchen sink. If you're a Van Halen hardcore and listen to this cast, this is stuff you'll appreciate. It's ear candy. Those who want one of the packages simply email ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com. That's ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com to make arrangements. What is understood need not be discussed.
Hi, this is Joe Satriani. Happy 8th anniversary and 100th episode to Dave and Dave.
Check out the new podcast, The Rock Quarry, your place to hear in-depth interviews with some of rock's most colorful characters, with your host, entertainment journalist David J. Criblay. The Rock Quarry is available for free on Spreaker and iTunes. You can check us out on Facebook at The Rock Quarry Podcast, on Twitter at Rock Quarry Pod, on Instagram at The Rock Quarry Podcast, or email us at therockquarrypodcast@gmail.com.
Our motivation was just, my father was a musician, and we grew up that way, and it was just the only thing we really knew how to do. You know? I think if it feels right, then you do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an extra special guest this evening. He is the best guitarist on the planet, in my opinion, right now. It is Joe Satriani. Joe, thank you so much for coming on our anniversary episode and our 100th episode.
Wow, congratulations. Thank you for that incredible intro. That's amazing.
Let me tell you, Joe, I saw you at the Beacon on Saturday night with Steve. What a show. Absolutely tremendous. I was more than impressed, and I'm so excited to see the two of you touring together.
What a great time we had. That was so much fun.
It really was amazing. And just to start off, where Dave and I are excited, I'm going to go see you twice. Going to go to Connecticut and Jersey to see you this summer with Sammy, and we're very excited about that. When and how did the Sammy concept get approached to you? How long ago has this been in the works?
I gotta think, must have been in October of last year when he reached out. What he said to me was that he wanted to do a career retrospective. Of course, I wanted to do it. When one of your best friends wants to go out and celebrate an incredible career like Sammy's, you want to be there. So I didn't really think about the details. I just thought, I'm going to go out there with Sam and I'm going to help him celebrate this amazing career. And then when we started talking about the songs, I realized, wow, there's going to be a lot of Van Halen in this tribute. I kept thinking, well, that's going to happen in the summer. It's almost a year away. Once I finish all my other tours, I'll have plenty of time to get down to relearning Montrose and Van Halen and even the stuff I did in Chickenfoot that I'd forgotten about. Then he called and he said, oh, by the way, we got to do this Howard Stern thing. And it was really funny because at the time I hadn't played for about 3 weeks. I'd been painting every day for an art show that was coming up the same week as the Howard Stern show. So I said, oh, we really shouldn't do this because, I'm not going to be ready. I can't play this stuff. He knew for years I avoided learning the Van Halen stuff so I wouldn't copy it.
Okay.
So, I was just a fan. I could hum and I could sing every part, but I never actually tried to finger it because, once you learn something, you start using it. It's just the nature, human nature. But then I thought, well, okay, I'm going to have to at least spend a couple of days once I get all these canvases and guitars out to Wentworth Gallery, then I'll pick up the guitar and see if I can remember these songs. So anyway, it was fun. It's always a great opportunity to hang with Howard. So that was fun, although it was difficult to try to pull all that off at 6 a.m. That's how quickly it came together. One phone call followed by a second, and all of a sudden we're selling tickets. So typical music industry stuff.
When Sam called you, did you pick up the phone and say, I've been waiting for this call. I knew you would come?
No, I had no idea. Sam lives a very exciting life. Like every other day, he's doing something somewhere with somebody. He's got some new business he's launching, and he's got some crazy idea about songs or whatever. But this took me by surprise. I really had no idea. I thought that he was just going to do another album with The Circle. That seemed like a natural thing to do. So I was totally shocked. And I didn't even know what he was thinking in terms of the band. Like, was he going to have a big band with background singers and 2 keyboard players or rhythm guitar players or what? It was a bit of a shock, but a pleasant one to know that he wanted to go out like that version of Van Halen, that sort of mid to late 80s version of Van Halen. I thought, oh, that's really cool. Let's just get a real keyboard player because I don't play enough keyboards. The Circle's been doing an amazing job playing with backing tracks, for the keyboard parts. And Vic Johnson's got all that guitar stuff down. So I thought, well, to make it more unique, we're going to need someone who can play keyboards as well as Ed, and then who can sing also. And I just happened to be touring with Ray Thistlethwaite from Thirsty Merc, who's just an amazing musician all around, and he plays keyboards and guitar, and he sings like crazy, And so I got the two of those guys together, and Sammy loved Ray, so now we got a real rock band, so it's really cool.
That's amazing. And what was your knowledge of the Sammy Van Halen era material? Were you pretty up on that? Were you as familiar with that as the old Roth stuff?
No, I don't think I was. I think I knew the hits because they were inescapable at the time. The Hagar era run of Van Halen was super successful. So you would see it on TV when people used to watch TV all the time. And you'd hear it on the radio when terrestrial radio was the thing. So yeah, I think I knew more about the hits. Whereas in the early days, the Roth era, the first 3 albums, I was more of a deep fan that would just spin the albums all the time and wasn't paying that much attention to the media about what was a hit song and what wasn't. Of course, when I went to see them, you get to see a whole other show because the Van Halen shows were amazing. They were an explosion of the individual talents of the band as well as them playing their hits. As you well know, there was no comparison. Both versions of that band with either David or Sammy were absolutely amazing live.
Totally, yeah. Did you have any input in the set list with Sam putting this show together, or was he kind of dictating what he wanted to do?
Well, we're looking at about 30 to 40 songs in general. We have to somehow distill down to a powerful set that fits within the venue's rules.
Right.
I mean, your audience may not know, but you rent the venue every night, and the venue tells you when you can start and when you got to stop.
Right,
so
right.
Every act is a guest, basically, at the venue. So I think that Sam wants to give the fans exactly what they want and more, and he also wants to surprise them with a few things that maybe they didn't get to, on the later tours because of one reason or another. So I was very happy to see, like, Seven Seals show up, on
Right.
the set list. I was like, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Sure.
It's such an unusual song for Eddie, I mean, it's the opposite of Panama, it's
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But
That's
was
a great deep cut.
It is. It's a great deep cut, and it shows what a unique composer Edward was. I mean, he was so deep, and I actually just wanted to be on the receiving end of what Sam and Mike really wanted to do. Because, Mike's one of the OGs, and he's bringing a lot of live Van Halen expertise into the mix here because he's been on all the most important tours, and he knows what works live. And some songs on the album don't work live, they're hard to put across when you're in front of an arena or something like that. So I think that what we've got right now is a fantastic set. It even has two of my own songs sitting there, which is great, and a couple of Chickenfoot and Montrose and Circle. So, but it's mainly Van Halen from both eras. They're all really great. It's like a super fun, high energy set.
I can imagine.
Really
I can imagine.
amazing.
And is Michael going to take over the Roth stuff?
I don't know, to tell you the truth, because I think I've only done a Van Halen song on stage with Mikey once, maybe, and I'm not even sure if it was a real gig. It may have been a party or something.
Okay.
So, I mean, in the recent past, I know Mike's been doing a couple of songs, but I never know what they are. I hear Vic telling me, oh, we did this song, we did that song, like maybe he's singing Panama or something like that, but I don't really know which ones Mike and Sam are going to divvy up. But I do believe that Sam really wants to get to all of them, to tell you the truth.
Is Sammy looking to do rotations, rotating songs in and out of the set throughout the tour?
Oh, I bet he is, yeah. I mean, in my experience touring with Sam and Chickenfoot is right before you walk on stage, there's going to be a set change.
Okay.
I mean, it's a tough job to be a singer, it really is the hardest job. And so if he's not feeling something, but he's really feeling something else, you really got to go with it because they're the ones that stand in front of everybody else. So in my view, when you're in a vocal band, your job is really to support the singer. I'm totally happy with that. I'll learn a really big catalog of songs to make sure I can feel relaxed with them. And then if he wants to switch out, finish what you started with Best of Both Worlds or Right Now with I Can't Drive 55, whatever, I can swing either way.
Right. Now, are you approaching the job as doing VH songs with Joe Satch style, or are you kind of looking to capture Eddie's vibe?
Oh, I'm really excited to jump into that Eddie vibe. And I've already started. I got this new amp from Third Power Amps, designed by Delana Scott, and it has gotten me much closer to the feel of the strings. The most important thing for me is the feel and the tone of the strings have to be right so that I can sort of jump into that creative and stylistic space that Eddie was in. He could do things because of his setup, basically his guitar and his amp, that, let's say, a year ago, I'd never be able to do with my guitar and amp.
Okay.
I'm using a different guitar, different bridge, different size strings, way different amp because my gig's different. I'm playing melodies and solos. Eddie mostly played rhythm guitar. When you really listen to any Van Halen song, it's 90%, 85% rhythm guitar. guitar. That's a totally different set of knobs, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So in the past, I always thought if I ever get to play these songs, you know, you really want to get closer to using his tools. The problem was is that he had so many great sounds and they changed over time. From the Roth era alone, within it, you could tell that things changed quite a bit. And then as soon as Sammy got in the band and Eddie started using Soldanos and then the Peavies, the sound went through a radical change. No longer that monoplexy with some reverb and little echoplex. Now all of a sudden it's in stereo. There's lots of gain on the guitar, flanging and eventide stereo spread and all that stuff. Ain't Talking About Love is one sound. You can look at all those big songs like, you know, 5150. That's a whole other kind of a sound. It's really amazing how once you start playing it, you know, you can play the chords and memorize the solo, but if it doesn't have that thing that you expect, then it doesn't sound quite right. A song like Best of Both Worlds, it has such a unique tone to it, and it's the complete opposite of Panama. You know, it's just the total opposite. It was suggested to me that you could get some sort of modeling rig and then just capture every sound and then just step on a button and you'd be there and there. But I couldn't help being so impressed with the Live Without a Net performance from '86. Eddie's still using the Marshalls. It's super complicated. I'm sure you guys have seen the photos.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
His live rig is totally insane.
Yeah.
But it still sounded like a rock and roll show with a guy with a guitar and one amp, you know, maybe a couple of pedals.
Sure.
It wasn't a very complicated setting, and he did the whole show with this sound. I thought this is what's going to make me feel comfortable, which is to find a sound that's very close to that 86 sound and then do the whole show like that rather than switching amplifiers simply to capture all the different eras. There's just too many eras. My head would be spinning and everyone would be wanting to remix their monitors every time I switch guitar sound.
Right. So are you using a whole new line of guitars? Are you going to be using Ed's guitars, the EVH brand guitars, the Wolfgang guitars? What are you going to be using?
Yeah, see, that's another thing. You know, depending on how deep you want to go into this, the main difference, I think, with the guitars, Edward and I both played 25.5-inch scale guitars. There are a couple, obviously, on the album. Sometimes he'd pick up a Gibson, so he'd be a little shorter scale. But live, those guitars were made up of the same things that mine are made up of. The main difference is the bridge. I played with a floating bridge, and Eddie played with a bridge that sat right on the body of the guitar. This has a big impact on two areas of guitar playing, and this is real nitpicking guitar player stuff. The first one is how aggressive you can get with hitting strings. When your Floyd Rose system is sitting flat, the bridge is flat on the neck, you can whack the strings as hard as you want, and the vibrations basically stay in the string and vibrate around the guitar. When you're using a floating vibrato bar, the intensity of your attack is going to go through the bar and it's going to go into the springs and back up, and you have to make a slight adjustment. You have to learn how to create the sound of a heavy attack with actually a lighter strumming hand attack. This can throw people a little bit if they're not used to it. The other thing is what we call a bending double stops. So that's where you're holding some strings down with one finger or maybe just one string, and then you're fingering another string and bending it, and then you're playing those 2 or 3 notes together. And what happens with a floating bridge is all the strings go out of tune as soon as you start to bend another string because the bridge is floating.
Right.
And an Eddie system, you can play all those country licks and everything stays in tune. Like if you're doing the solo for Runaround, that's an important part of that solo is being able to do those bending double stops. So what am I going to do, right? Am I going to change the solo, or am I just going to get one of my JS guitars to have the edge sitting flat? So I think right now that's what we're doing.
Okay.
My luthier in San Francisco, Gary Brower, is working on a number of guitars that will basically mimic Eddie's bridge system.
Okay.
I've given up on the D-tuna. That thing just doesn't keep the guitar in tune.
Okay.
And I really do like the guitar to stay in tune better than it did in the 80s, let's say.
Sure, of course.
So,
oh, Joe, you're so demanding, expecting your guitar to stay in tune.
I know. I mean, you know, I mean, strings go out of tune anyway, and I destroy the guitar song after song. But a lot of my parts depend on me being able to pull up, you know. I like using the Sustainiac, and I like being able to get crazy harmonics pulling the bar way up. So I'll probably have some JS guitars that are modified for the gig and some JS guitars that are totally stock. I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay.
To tell you the truth, guys, I feel a little funny walking out with like a Frankenstein or one of Eddie's iconic guitars. Just, for some reason, I don't think I've earned the right to do that. So,
well, I was going to ask you that question. Is because Ed is gone and his fans are hungry for live Van Halen music, are you nervous about this position, or do you kind of welcome the challenge?
Oh, both. Every night I walk on stage, I'm feeling the butterflies. I really want to be able to give my fans what they expect from me. So that's no different. But yeah, the added, little bit of anxiety is that, you're playing these iconic songs by someone we all love. I'm pretty confident that the audience will realize that we're sort of paying respect together. They can be sure I'm doing my homework and I'll give it my absolute best because, in my head, it's very similar to like when I was playing with Deep Purple. I couldn't get away from Richie's sound in my head. That's all I heard every night. Every time I go to play Smoke on the Water, I did not want to hear Joe Satriani.
Well, you grew up with that material. I mean, how could you get it out of your head? So that's something that and you also, not only Richie, but you took on the Keith Richards role when you played with Jagger. I mean, that was another immense weight.
Yeah, so when I'm playing Ain't Talking About Love, I am just going to nail that solo. I'm not going to change it. No way.
Sure.
I'm not going to throw in any silly Satriani stuff.
Now, were you skittish about getting involved in another Van Halen project after what went down with Alex and Dave?
Well, I was very excited about getting together with Alex and Dave. I thought that the sentiment was really right. I can certainly speak for Alex because Alex is really a straight-ahead talker. He tells you exactly how he feels about it. No bullshit, And so we connected very well in all of our conversations and during our meeting together. And I knew that his heart was pure about doing it right. To me, that was everything, I don't really know Dave very well. He's David Lee Roth. He's a crazy lead singer.
Right.
So that was a bit more frightening because there wasn't enough time. I was hoping that more people connected with Edward would have come on board, like it would have felt better if Wolfgang and Sammy and everyone was talking because it did feel awkward. And, the first thing I said to those guys when they called me was, why me?
Yeah.
I said, why don't you call Nuno? He really plays like Eddie and Phil X, and there's all these guitar players out there. Joshua Jones, he's just freaky how close he gets. So they talked me out of that. They had all kinds of reasons why they thought I was the guy, and I was kind of scratching my head, but I thought there's no way I'm turning down the chance to honor someone I thought was like the greatest, So I knew it was going to be hard work, but I thought that's my job,
Did you guys ever jam? Did you ever physically perform together?
No, it never got that far. We got real close. I mean, at one point, I remember Dave called. He wanted us within 3 weeks to be ready to play a show in Central Park. I think it was New York City coming out party, semi-post-COVID kind of thing.
Right.
And I just remember saying, hey, here's a bunch of songs I can't play. Because I had already told them, look, it's going to take me a couple of months to deprogram me and to reprogram Eddie into my right hand.
Right.
But I said, okay, I'm always up for a challenge. I knew that could go either way. But then a week before they canceled, actually it was Dave. He just called and said, it's off. I don't want to do it.
Did he give a reason?
No, he didn't. Alex intimated that that's kind of like the way it is with Dave. But I didn't mind, actually, because I've been so busy. During that whole period, I was working on an album, trying to get the tours back together, post-pandemic and all that. So it's not like I had nothing to do. I was just trying to figure out how to fit all this in. Like at the beginning of our conversation, I think it's important to note that this is Sammy Hagar retrospective tour. It just so happened that he was in one of the most amazing periods of Van Halen.
Right.
And so that's going to figure big. When I look at the set list, maybe 3/4 Van Halen, maybe.
Right,
I
would
haven't
say,
really done the percentages. From the sidelines, you might think, wow, that's like a Van Halen tribute. But actually, it's a Sammy Hagar tribute.
It's the best of all worlds. Yeah, absolutely. The plan with Alex and Dave, what was the original idea? Was the idea to do a tour? Or was the idea to do a show, an album? What was the plan?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I immediately, after saying yes and then not even thinking about the ramifications of it, I did voice my opinion about what I thought was the right way to do it. Even though I knew as the words came out of my mouth, I thought, oh, that's not your place, Joe, to tell these guys what you think. But I couldn't help it because Dave had mentioned a couple of things, and one of them was, like a residency in Las Vegas. And I just remember saying, I know these songs. I've seen you guys live. This is not a show for an indoor event, like a theater, 6 nights a week or whatever. I said, the songs are not meant for that. I remember seeing you guys in stadiums and arenas, and that's what all the fans remember. They remember the big Van Halen show. That's where I always thought the band shined, both the Roth era and Hagar era, because the personalities are so huge, and they needed an arena at least, to show people the brilliance they had as a band and as individual musicians. So the thought of being stuck in a theater in Las Vegas was depressing to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought it was a step down, and I didn't know Eddie, but I was imagining I think if Eddie wanted to do that, he would have done it, and he didn't.
Right.
So that means he didn't want to do it. So I wasn't about to represent Eddie in a way that I was going to guess he wouldn't want to see it, I was pushing, even though I had no power in the situation, I did voice my opinion by saying, you guys, you got to do it as an outdoor tour that goes on for months, or at least arenas. Please don't do the residency in Vegas thing. That just doesn't seem right to me at all. But, I was just a new guy. I don't think they gave it any credence what I was saying. But I don't think they had thought it through. I could tell that the loss of Eddie was still a very strong emotional component. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to force my opinion on them. I knew they were still grieving.
Yeah.
So, it was a difficult time. They were trying to figure things out. But, like millions of other people, once we saw Wolfie play, that was it. To me, I thought, well, there it is. It just happened. That's the most beautiful thing I ever saw.
Sure.
The way he nailed it, and the fact that he had the emotional courage to do that and to keep it together and play so well. And I thought anything else that follows that can't be some guy trying to replace Eddie. It can't be. So I was relieved. To answer your original question, I was kind of relieved when it fell apart because I thought seeing Wolfie play was actually the best version, the best idea of saying goodbye to Eddie in public. And it made sense in a strange way. You jump into the future. When Sam calls me, it made more sense that he was doing a retrospective. So I know everyone who interviews me says, hey, you're doing this Van Halen tour. And I go, well, actually, it's a Sammy Hagar tour.
Right.
When you were talking to Al and Dave, did they discuss who was going to play bass on this potential tour? Was it Michael Anthony? Was it Jason Newsted? Who was going to be the bass player in the band?
That's so funny you should ask me that, because that was my question. I think within the first 2 minutes of being on the phone with Dave and Alex, I said, oh, who's playing bass, And I was shocked when they said, well, who would you like to play bass? And I thought, what? Because I just assumed they were going to say it's got to be Mike, but They didn't. It took me quite a few seconds to think that through. Why didn't they say Mike? I'm a Van Halen fan like you guys, so we think, well, if you're going to do Van Halen, you got to have Mike Anthony, right?
Right.
When they posed the question to me, who would you like to play bass with? I started to think, well, that's actually a really hard question. But I came around to Jason because in a more personal way, I'd been around Jason a bit when we happened to be in the same studio recording. Be out in the parking lot playing basketball or something. I knew he was a Van Halen fan. We share a love of trying to be artists.
Sure.
Or painting. And he's just a really cool guy. And besides being an amazing singing bass player, and I always thought that he had a really fantastic, aggressive attitude towards playing rock bass. And it's a thing, there are lots of amazing bass players out there, but people don't often realize how unique rock bass playing is. And it's a set of skills. And you either got him or you don't. And he's one of the guys that had him. So I just said, hey, what about Jason? And they responded in a positive way. And so we started reaching out. That was a pretty funny conversation, actually, when I called Jason, because we hadn't spoken in a while. And I said, okay, I got the craziest offer, So he definitely was down with it. And we thought we were going to New York City back in the summer to do that show. And we were busy learning songs for the set. But then afterwards, things got strange, and I wish I could explain that, but I can't. I don't know. It's just, I guess it's Dave. I don't know Dave, but every time I interface with him, it's a surprise.
What was the set list consisting of that you were working on with Jason?
It was just Roth stuff, the Roth era stuff. I don't remember anymore, but first couple of albums, just ending up with 1984, I guess.
Did you actually get together with Jason?
No, unfortunately, we just spoke on the phone and traded notes. I was really looking forward to it. But, at the time, we were sworn to secrecy, until Jason decided he wasn't.
Right.
Which is totally his prerogative,
Have you ever compared notes with Michael Anthony on this?
No, not really. I mean, I played with Mike for years, and he's such a natural musician. We kind of have, shorthand. We don't really discuss much. We just start playing and adjust as we go. I'll tell you, the thing that stood out when I was doing the Howard Stern thing was that it was going to take a while to catch up on how Sam, Mike, and even Jason now have adjusted the arrangements of the songs to fit all the live shows they've been doing. I only know what's on the albums. I'm just like a fan, so I know exactly how the album version goes. But every song they go, oh, no, we don't do it like that anymore. We do it like this, and we go here, and we cut this out, and we put that in. So I know that leading up to the Stern show, there were a bunch of things that were so different that I really just kept staring at Mike, hoping that he would raise his eyebrow to say, this is where we deviate, I swear on that show, I was just remembering every song like a couple of beats right before a chord change or something. It wasn't like I had the stuff even close to being memorized. So,
we know that.
Well, you pulled it off, Joe, for what it's worth. You pulled it off.
Yeah.
Although I thought lasers were going to come out of your eyes when Sammy asked you to play the intro to Mean Street.
It was ridiculous. That was silly.
It was. Any normal person would have just made a joke and said no, but when Howard asked you a question, I'm not going to lie to Howard or try to be evasive. I was just being honest. I was curious about that, and it is one of those, it's funny, this is from a technical point of view, because physically it's very unique. It shows some of the uniqueness of Eddie's incredible prowess when it came to rhythmic figures. He had a very quick set of hands, both hands, right and left, which is unique with guitar players. So he did stuff that most people can't do. And the other thing was the gear and the amp setup. And if you listen to the beginning of Mean Streets, it's a very unique guitar sound. Normal people can't do it with any guitar sound. I bet Eddie could do it on a ukulele. But yeah, you got to have everything set up right. As we were talking about earlier, that's part of my quest of getting the right gear together, because I'm going to need that to help me get into the right zone for some of these techniques that don't come naturally to me, but I'm going to be practicing for the next few months on.
So, Joe, I wanted to ask you, when Alex initially called you, what did he say? Joe, I'm Alex Van Halen. I want to do blank. What exactly was he wanting to do? Like, what was the initial plan he had for that project? Was it, I want to do a show, I want to do a tour, I want to restart up the band and have you play guitar? Like, what was his words?
I mean, it was a very personal phone call. As I said before, it was still an intense period of grieving for the whole family. So it wasn't like your usual rock and roll professional call. So it wasn't entirely upbeat, let's say.
Did you know each other at all?
No, I'd never met Alex or spoken to him. I'd met Dave once or twice, but it was just, backstage, hello, how are you kind of stuff.
Right.
And I'd only met Eddie once before as well, way back in 92. So I really was an outsider to the whole camp, the whole family. But, he said that he wanted to put a band together to do a tour, to do a proper tribute to his brother.
Okay.
That's how he delivered it to me.
Okay.
And as I said before, I was touched, but I said, really, I don't play like Eddie.
Yeah.
And I think I rattled off quite a few guitar players. I really enjoyed listening to them do Eddie down pat.
Yeah.
It was just, there are guys out there who have memorized every single fingering.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I pointed that out, and he said, no, it's not about that. And he told me some stuff about how Eddie felt about my guitar playing, and I was touched, obviously. So I thought, well, okay, if you're ready to accept me for who I really am, then I'd love to do it.
That's amazing. Was he planning on calling it Van Halen or something else?
Good question. I don't even think we got that far.
Okay. But he was looking to do a tour, though. He was looking to do a tour?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there were some good-natured questions that he threw out. He didn't lay out a plan entirely to me. He was interested in what I thought. I don't know who else he was talking to other than management, maybe, his management, about what was possible. But that's when it started to come up where I kept thinking like, you know, I remember seeing them at these big venues. And so, you know, I voiced my opinion, which is it should be big. You got to think big. You can't think small. Otherwise, it'll come off small, you know, and I just didn't think that was right for Eddie's legacy.
And Ed passed in October of 2020. So when did he contact you? How soon after that? Was that in 2021?
It was in 21, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Did they send you any gear to work with?
No.
No, okay. Then that Central Park gig, that was the one that Journey did. That was Irving Azoff. He's the management company. So that Irving, I think, put Journey in there. And the reason why I know that is because I was covering a gig at Jones Beach while they were having a gig in Central Park. And that's when they had the storm. It was a crazy, crazy experience.
Wow. Yeah. Well, typical summer in New York.
Yeah.
Right? That's how it all came about.
Speaking of summer in New York, why isn't the Best of All Worlds tour coming to New York?
I don't know. You know, I haven't looked at the schedule other than the start date. I have to say, you know, it's really funny. I'm out here on tour with Steve Vai, and when we're not warming up for our own sets, you can hear us in our dressing rooms. I'm playing Van Halen, and he's playing Robert Fripp.
That's true.
We have these other gigs where we have to play like other people, and they're coming.
That's
and
true.
So they're on our schedule. So I know he hasn't memorized the beat schedule, and I haven't looked at the Hagar schedule yet, but I just know that I've got to be ready for the first show on the 13th of July.
Exactly. So now, why didn't Chickenfoot ever put any of those Sammy-era Van Halen songs in the set list, being that half the band was in Chickenfoot?
I think when we first got together, there was a fear that we would turn into like a cover band if we started doing some Chili Pepper songs and some Joe songs and some Van Halen songs. And it would undermine the credibility of the band that we were, because we were writing original material. So one day we said, you know what, we're not going to do Surfing with the Alien, we're not going to do Under the Bridge, we're not going to do Panama.
Okay.
You know, we're not going to do any of these songs. The only songs that we're willing to do, because it has to do with our roots, is maybe a Montrose song. And that's where we left it. We just decided that Chickenfoot was about a bunch of guys celebrating common roots in early rock. And so anytime we did covers, it had to do with what we were playing when we were young people, when we were kids. And so that's why we would do a Who song or Hendrix or something like that.
That seems kind of suspicious, Joe, that the only cover song by the band, by a member of the band, was from Sam. Was he like, okay, we'll do cover songs, but one of them's going to be from Montrose? Like, was he like insistent on that, or was that just a thing everybody agreed on?
Oh, Sam was never insisted on anything. It was really a very fun, loose arrangement, the way we did everything, and everyone had an equal say. I think it just felt right. It may have just come down to the fact that Chad really loved Denny Carmassi's drum intro. It could have been something that simple.
Do you think that because you're being reunited with Sam and Mike this summer, that this will restart the engine for Chickenfoot?
You know, it might. Sam and I have been working on a song. We've had to do it remotely, but yeah, it would be fun, and it would feel good to me to do it. I haven't spoken to Chad about it directly in the last month or so. We've talked about other things, but not that. So I'm not sure what the Chili Peppers are up to right now.
And in terms of the song, The Sea of Emotion, Part 1, which I'm very excited about, this is your current single and a collaboration with Steve Vai. How did this song come about? Is this new? Is it old? Tell us about that.
Oh, well, it's a brand new song. It's part of a trilogy. I know that sounds like a Spinal Tap answer. But basically what happened was my son came to me with an idea about doing a documentary about his life growing up with me, coinciding with the first tour that he did, which was the first G3 tour back in 96 when he turned 4, and basically examining his life, G3, and the life of guitar players and what electric guitar playing means to everybody. So we started off with that, and then it turned into, you guys should do a reunion tour, which we started to book, and that sounded really great. And then we wanted the tour to continue, and Eric wasn't available to have the tour keep going.
Okay.
So then we were approached about it becoming like a G2. What if it was just Joe and Steve? And Steve and I really wanted to just keep playing together. So we said, sure. And then I think it was either my management or record company said, oh, it would be great if you guys had a song. And we both said, yeah, that's a great idea. Then it turned into, boy, if it was an album, that would even be crazier. And Steve and I were like, yeah, let's do it. Now's the time, you know.
Right.
So I remember sitting down. I wasn't on tour at that very moment, and I thought, what's going to be the theme of this album besides Joe and Steve playing together? And I always need to write from a true emotional standpoint. You know, that's how I write songs, from just being inspired by something real.
Sure.
And I thought about Steve and I growing up on Long Island, going to Carr Place High School, doing all the things crazy kids do when they're in high school. And there was this one place that my friends and I used to go to late at night, early in the morning after parties and whatnot, and just park and look out over this field that was part of the Carr Place High School complex. We named it the Sea of Emotion because we would sit there and we would freely express ourselves without fear of embarrassment or anything like that. It became a really cool place for us. And I had introduced that then to my young student, Steve Vai, at the time, because he started taking lessons when he was 12. And it became something that was very important in our journey into turning into adults, is having this safe spot, so to speak. So it just sort of came up in my mind, and I thought, you know, okay, I'm going to write a song about this place that we call the Sea of Emotion. So I wrote 2 songs. I recorded them. I sent them to Steve, and I said, what do you think about this? And he was like, yeah, let me add my parts. We have a system now where one of us will write something, send a basic session file to the other, wherever he might be, and we'll work independently on it, send it back and say, what do you think? Is that cool? And then we send it to our producer, Eric Kodia, who's working out of LA, and he'll put it all together for us and get it ready for when we mix the final album. But it's going to take the next, 10 months to get it all finished up.
Oh, wow. Is the album called The Sea of Emotion?
We actually don't have a title or artwork or anything. All we have is about 3 or 4 songs that are finished.
Okay.
Not mixed, except for the part 1. And that's just our single mix for now. We had to get something out. We needed something for ZZ's video, which we just absolutely love that he took that approach.
That was so cool. A great video by your son ZZ, who also did Sam's videos, right? He did Sam's videos for the Circle album.
Yes, he did, yeah.
Awesome.
That was a while ago, but yeah.
Absolutely. He's a talented young man. Now, are you going to drop part 2 as well?
We're going to drop something. I don't know what we're going to drop. We have part 2 and part 3 are finished. There's 4 other pieces that are floating, and they're not even close to being finished pieces yet. They're just some ideas. We had this idea, like, if one of us had a song that was complete, then the other would finish it. You know, they just put their parts on. But if we also had some cool ideas that were more fragmented, that we would share them immediately rather than sit there and try to work on them ourselves. So I dropped a bunch of fragments on Steve, and he dropped a bunch of fragments on me, and so we're just having fun seeing how we would help each other complete the other song. I'm not sure what we do for the second song. It'll either be part 2 or part 3. It kind of depends on the intensity of how everyone's feeling. I think part 2 is a bit dreamier.
Okay.
That I wrote. This piece is definitely not as like classic rock sounding. Steve, when he wrote part 3, he actually used a recording of the 2 of us when we were teenagers. I recorded us playing together at one of our guitar lessons, and I gave him the tape maybe, 20 years ago or something, and he transferred it, and so he made it part of the beginning of the song, and then wrote a song sort of lifting parts from it, you know.
That really is crazy cool. That is crazy cool.
That's very Steve Vai, too.
Yes, and as a fan of both of yours, Dave and I, 2 Long Island boys, by the way, we are ecstatic that you guys are finally doing something together, because we've been waiting like a long time for you guys to just sit down and say, you know what, we're finally going to work on something together. Because we know you're both crazy busy releasing albums, going on tour, working with others. So we're just like beyond excited. And when we heard the first song, we were like, yes, this is like great, real song, not just guitar wankery, as some people like to call it. So we're like super excited that there's going to be a whole album behind it, and we can't wait.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I tell you, your connection with Steve is so unique because, to be honest with you, you're very, very different guitar players, but there is a common thread that ties you together. It's like hard to explain. You're sort of different sides of the same coin in a way. You go together, you complement each other, although you're very, very, very different. And you perform differently, and your music is different. How would you describe that connection? It's got to be a very unique one in your life.
Yeah, it is. It's very hard to put into words. You're absolutely right. It's almost like we come from different eras. I did start playing music just a few years before him, but when you're that young, it really makes a difference. Our family lives, with the music that our parents and our siblings, our older siblings listened to, had a big impact on our foundation of music. So I'm a lot more Beatles and Stones and Hendrix, and he's a lot more sort of Led Zeppelin and Zappa.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you can really hear the difference when you go and you see a show. Our shows are totally different. Our performance style is totally different. But, here's a funny thing. We were both taught music theory by the same high school music theory teacher who had a huge impact on us.
Wow.
A guy named Bill Westcott from Carr Place High School was just this brilliant young Juilliard graduate who didn't care that we looked like, the devil's children from Black Sabbath. We're walking around the high school.
Right.
And we would just walk in there with motorcycle boots and hair below our shoulders. But it didn't faze him. And he taught us so many musical secrets. It was just so beautiful that we connected with that. I think that's our main connection, is that we love music and we don't deny our natural style.
You guys do such a treat. So for those of you who haven't seen their show yet, Steve comes on, does a set, Joe does a set, and then they come out together and do a encore. And you guys actually you really got me in there, which was an incredible surprise, along with Enter Sandman. Those were the real surprises there. How did those choices come about?
I was just texting my keyboardist, Ray Thistlethwaite, who is a great singer, and so we wanted to do something different because on the previous G3 tour, which we had just finished, he was singing decidedly older material, and Ray's a young man, so he was going way back into like his father's record collection to hear these things, and I was just thinking we should just not do anything that we did on the G3 tours. So we were texting like the funniest ideas for songs, Well, we knew we were going to be doing The Sea of Emotion, so that was a given.
Sure.
So it was only two, and I was just trying to think of what would be a real challenge for Ray vocally. And so I threw out Enter Sandman thinking he was going to say, I ain't singing that, But instead, he was like, yeah, if you can imagine the text, yeah, look like Hetfield,
Incredible.
So that was really great. I was really happy that he responded that way. He's been phenomenal every night doing that. And the Kinks thing I just thought would be really great because it is a really good old song that my generation really knows as a Kinks song. It was very important in the scene of rock becoming a message of sound as well as just lyrics and style. But the sound was very important back then in the 60s when that carried a message, that was part of the message. And it just so happened it was a Van Halen song, and I thought, okay, this is either a good idea or a bad idea. When I floated it to Steve, he was like, oh yeah, let's do it.
Now, also wanted to ask you, it's incredible how the legacy of Surfing with the Alien continues through the years. I mean, I listen to all your albums. It's like a regular thing. I listen to your music like I drink water. It's something I do every day. And I always choose between all the different albums. But Surfing with the Alien just seems to stick so heavily with the fans, and they always want stuff from Surfing. What is it about that album? Because all your albums are good, but what is it about that album that you think has latched on to people? Was it the timing when it came out? People have personal attachments to those songs, and you always obviously play several cuts from it in your set. Why that album, do you think, stuck the landing so hard?
I know that when I approached Relativity Records records with the idea behind it at a showcase that was in New York City at the China Club, I think it was. And they had just released Not of This Earth. They weren't sure if they were going to sign me to like a real record deal, you know, because I had recorded Not of This Earth on my own label at the time. And Barry Coburn said, well, what is your idea for this new album? And I said, well, I want to celebrate everything I love about guitar playing from Chuck Berry to Hendrix and everything in between. I said, that's what it's going to be. And he saw me play Satch Boogie that night. And after that, he said, okay, you got a deal. So we shook hands. So that really remained, I think the goal was for me to celebrate all the things that I thought were really great about electric guitar playing. So I was so happy when that record became popular because it is exactly who I am. You know, it's not like you try to write a hit single to get famous and you get famous and then you hate the song.
Right, right, yeah.
Very often there's bands where the hit single kills the band, you know?
Sure.
This is the exact opposite, which is this is the perfect album to be the one that's the most popular for me because I love the songs and they just flow out of me so naturally.
It's a beautiful thing for sure. And we just wanted to ask you one last thing. Has Sammy talked about possibly recording the tour this summer for a release? Because the set list you're doing and the project you're doing with the Best of All Worlds is such a unique moment in time. Is there any possibility of recording it?
I'm sure everything gets recorded these days, so I don't really know. I mean, this is early days, believe it or not. And they've been leaving me alone pretty much because they know that I'm kind of busy.
Right, yeah.
So I'm focusing on that first show and making sure the material's great. But we'll have some casual rehearsals in May where we're just going to sit around and probably just sitting maybe acoustically and just go over all the songs that we think might be fun. And I'm sure I'll start to hear some of the plans. But, you know, it's not my gig, so I'm relieved of that duty of having to make all these decisions about recording or filming or anything like that. So, but if I know Sammy Hagar, he's got something up his sleeve. So,
okay. All right, is there a Joe Satriani solo album in the works?
No.
No, okay.
I would say that my priority right now is the Satch Vai tour and the Satch Vai album. We don't know what it's going to be called, but it'll be me and Steve doing something.
Okay. Well, we look forward to it. Joe, thank you so very much for spending time with us today on our 8th anniversary and 100th episode. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. We are so excited to see you this summer, and it's going to be an amazing tour, and we wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And congratulations, Dave and Dave. 100 episodes. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Whoa! How about that for rock video music fans? Live all day, all night. You know what you need. Only right here on Dave TV.
Check us out on Facebook at Dave and Dave Unchained, a Van Halen podcast, on Twitter at DD Unchained, on Instagram at DD Unchained Podcast, and you can email us at ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.
Joe, when you're discussing the set list with Sam, if there's any way you can convince him to do Big Bad Moon, you're going to hear a fan in Connecticut screaming his lungs off if you actually play that song.
And Bigfoot. You got to play Bigfoot. That's a killer tune. I mean, that's a great live tune. That's awesome. Joe, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure. And like I said, I listen to your music every day. You are my Hendrix, so I really appreciate all your music and years of incredible performance. Please, please, please consider coming to Long Island with the Vai Satch tour at some point. Please, because, I mean, it would only make sense for the two of you to play on the island.
Yes, yeah, that would be great.
By the way, Joe, Dave tells Steve Vai the same thing, that Steve is his Hendrix, just so you know.
That's not true at all.
No,
I have never said that. I have never said that to Steve. I love Steve to death. How dare you? How dare you?
I'm just busting your chops.
Oh, God. Let Joe go. All right. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate your time.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
You got it, buddy. Thank you.
Time.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Bye-bye.
And I was wondering if there's anybody in the hall here tonight who ever does it. Well, if you don't ever do it, then maybe this song wouldn't apply at all to you. But you might take your advice from Dr. Dave right here when I prescribe to you that if you're gonna do it, then you better do it all day and all night. I want to be with you all of the time. All day, all night, and all of the time. It's gonna be mine. The only time I feel alright. I want to be with you all of the time. All day and all of the night. All day and all of the night. All day and all of the night. Yes. No, I want to be with you all of the time. All day, all night, and all of the time. You're gonna make me fall in love blind. The only time I feel alright by your side. All day and all of the night. All day and all of the night. Sure feel good to me. And I know you're feeling the same way. So I'm gonna tell y'all, we only ask you once a night. I think this man over here, he knows what I'm gonna ask. Put your hands together, come on now, everybody. 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 Come on, all you people back there, I can see you put your hands up. Put them up. We're gonna give this drummer a rest right here. Everybody. Put them up here. Put your hands up, come on. We're gonna give this drummer a rest right here. We're gonna let you play. Come on, put them together. Louder! You keep it up now. I'm gonna sing. And all I want to be with you, leave you never. All day, all night, and all of the time, leave you never. The only time I feel alright is when